Alrighty. Oh, something went wrong on YouTube. Are we even live? Yes, we are. Okay. Another day of question period, House of Commons. All of that fantastic stuff going on in the world of Parliament and politics. It's kind of another slow news day, but we have some things to cover before we get into House of Commons and question period. Trudeau shares border plan with premiers in meeting on Trump tariff response. Everybody knows about the Trump tariff threat, the 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, and with Mexico as well, if we do not fix our borders. This threat has been made time and time again by Trump. As a matter of fact, I find it funny that people think it's shocking when he actually comes through with the things he says he's going to do. For example, when a video from a few months ago started resurfacing and Trump said he was going to do all these things, these were the things that he ran on for the past year and a half. At every single one of his rallies, he said these things over and over again, whether it's the tariff on imports or sending people back home, illegals specifically. All of these different things. I just find it funny, right? When people are like, oh my God, he's actually doing the things he says. Yes, Trump is a man of his word. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shared an overview of the federal government's plan to strengthen border security with Canada's premiers and discussed potential responses to tariffs threatened by U.S. President-elect Trump during a meeting Wednesday. Federal officials said. Public Safety Minister Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Dominic LeBlanc told reporters in Ottawa that the border plan was still being finalized. You had 10 years to create a border plan, but here we are, last second doing it, and would incorporate suggestions from the premiers during the meeting. And the second one held since Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports. He said details would be shared with the incoming Trump administration and Canadians in the coming days. We shared details of the border plan with premiers and received positive feedback, he said following the meeting. We've heard this before. Trudeau claims he goes to these meetings and has positive feedback or a good conversation, or the conversations he had were fruitful. I find it kind of hard and difficult to believe this man. After all of the lies and bullshit he perpetuates, it's just kind of pathetic at this point that anybody actually would believe him in the things he has to say. But here we are. Trudeau will have to kiss the ring to achieve smoother bilateral relations with Trump, claiming John Bolton. We're going to listen to a little bit of CTV news here before we continue onward. Let's
In the
take a
past
listen.
few weeks, the incoming president has referred to Canada as the 51st state and threatened a 25% blanket tariffs. I know you're familiar with this, on all Canadian imports. He also just a few days ago called our prime minister the governor of the great state of Canada. Should we be interpreting that as a joke or something more in your view?
Yes, it's a joke.
Well, I think as the saying goes, Trump is kidding on the straight. If asked, he'd say, of course it's a joke. And, you know, Justin and I have a very good relationship, but I think it's an indication of what he thinks of Trudeau. And, you know, it's mean. It's sort of a playground kind of thing, but that's Donald Trump.
You wrote in your book, The Room Where It Happened, I remember reading a few years ago, some descriptions of meetings that they had had, in particular at the G7, and the view of Donald Trump toward the prime minister. What was it like at that time? Do you think it was personal animosity, or it was more just about the issues and the sort of disagreement over tariffs, for example, at the time?
No, Trump doesn't care about issues. He cares about Donald Trump. And where I first saw the relationship in operation was at the G7 in Canada in 2018, where the other members of the G7 basically forced Trump into some statements in the outcome document that he didn't particularly like. I'd have to say I didn't like them either. But anyway, it was agreed. Trump got on a plane, Air Force One, because we were headed to Singapore for his first meeting with Kim Jong-un. And as we were flying over the Atlantic, I was sleeping, but Trump was up because he had heard that Prime Minister Trudeau had, in his view, insulted him in the last press conference at the close of the G7. And Trump, after he woke me up and some others, decided he was going to withdraw from the outcome document, which is unprecedented to say the least. But he was so outraged at what at that Trudeau press conference that's what he did. So my take on the relationship is that I don't know what it was before I saw it in action at the G7, but afterward it was.
Look, the bottom line is nobody has any respect for Trudeau, whether it's Donald Trump or any international leader. They look at our country as an absolute joke. They look at Trudeau as a weak man. They look at him as a weak leader. Leaders, they don't shake his hand. Leaders, they do not pay attention to him. They don't even acknowledge him as somebody worth their time. I don't know how many times I need to bring up that G7 video where Trudeau is literally standing on the outside while everybody surrounds Trump. The exact same thing is going to happen in his second term. I can't stress it enough. Trudeau, nobody cares about him. Whether it's Trump or any international leader, doesn't matter. And before we continue on to the, I guess, main news today, Elon Musk calls Justin Trudeau an insufferable tool. This is nothing new. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows Justin Trudeau is an insufferable tool. He's an idiot. Elon Musk jumping on the bandwagon with everybody else. We have Jagmeet. Now, this is the news that realistically nobody cares about. Nobody cares about what Jagmeet has to say anymore. Time and time again, he lies through his teeth, throwing Canadians under the bus for his own political gain, whether it's keeping his party intact or the $2.2 million pension. Whatever it is, he is not for Canadians. If he was for Canadians, Trudeau would have been outed during the third non-confidence vote. But Jagmeet, still in the coalition, quite obviously still in the coalition, backs Trudeau for a third time. Now, sadly, I don't want to listen to Jagmeet, but we're going to listen to Jagmeet and the stupidity that he has to say. Let's take a listen.
I want to start off talking about tariffs. The threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, 25% across the board, is a direct threat to hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs. Imagine what it feels like right now for a worker in a trade-sensitive sector who's wondering, will my job be the first to go when those tariffs are put in place? This is serious. That doesn't just mean that that worker loses their job, the entire family is impacted. So what is the response to these serious threats by the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister is telling us it's okay, oh, he's just joking, Donald Trump's just making jokes, no big deal. It is a big deal. On top of that, what we're seeing from Trudeau is that anytime Trump says jump, he says how high. That is not strength, that is not actually.
Whenever Trudeau tells you to jump, you say how high, because time and time again, you're in his pocket, backing him almost every step of the way, Jagmeet. I can't actually believe a single word he says anymore. It's just ridiculous.
Actually responding to what's going on. And then, when Trump trash talks Canada, we got the leader of the Conservative Party repeating that garbage. That hurts Canada, that hurts Canadian workers. What we need to do is acknowledge that Trump is a bully. Bullies look for weakness. That's why he's trolling us. So we need to send a message of strength. We need to have a
He's trolling us because we are an absolute former shell of what Canada used to be. Trudeau, time and time again, has made that quite obvious and clear, from the policies he enacts to the things he says on world stages to simply just him in the House of Commons.
Real war room, ready to go, fighting for Canadian jobs with unions at the table.
Yes, Jagmeet is a bully himself. He likes to sit there calling out bullies while he is the #1 Canadian bully right now.
We need to put in place and get ready to put in place retaliatory tariffs. We have to make it clear, if Trump picks this fight, it's going to hurt both of us, and it's not a fight that he wants. We have to show strength that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect Canadian jobs, we have to also make sure it's very clear.
So Jagmeet, is showing strength continuing to back Justin Trudeau? Because that is far from strength.
That tariffs on Canada don't just hurt Canadians, it's going to hurt Americans. We need to make that message very clear, make sure the pain is felt, and so he knows this is not the direction he wants to go. We have to defend Canadian jobs, and that's my commitment. Donc, avec les
All right, so I'm obviously going to skip over the French parts. We have some questions from reporters here as well, so we'll listen to those. Unless they're in French, we will not listen to them.
Holding conference news. First of all, Premiers Fury, Smith, Ford, and so on have been either on Fox News, on CNBC very soon, or going to the United States or holding conference calls with their governors to get the message out. First of all, do you approve of that? Do you like what's happening? And then I've got a second question.
Well, we certainly need to get our message out to the United States, but I've seen very mixed messages coming out from some of these Conservative premiers that are not making it clear that we need to defend Canadian jobs. I want to see a strong approach.
Jagmeet, you've made it unclear yourself whether you want to protect Canadian jobs, while you continue to back Trudeau. Every single thing this guy says, you could simply chalk it up to the fact that he continues to back and support Trudeau. It's that simple. Whenever he says he's for Canadians, Canadian jobs, Canadian healthcare, grocery stores, gas prices, you could simply chalk it up to the fact that he still supports Trudeau in every step of the way. He's a fucking liar. He's one of the biggest liars in Parliament. Jagmeet Singh specifically. Yes, Trudeau, massive liar, lies through his teeth all the time. But Jagmeet, oh my God, man, he is second to none when it comes to lying.
That makes it clear that everyone in Canada wants to defend Canadian jobs, that we reject the misinformation of Trump. We don't want to repeat the same things that he's saying about our borders. It's clearly not true when he says that the Canada-US border is the same as the Mexico-USA border. That's clearly not true. Repeating those lies hurts Canadians, hurts our jobs, and I'm concerned that the Conservatives have not been very strong on that point.
So what do you want to see from the virtual meeting of the First Ministers with the Prime Minister?
I want to see a clear commitment that we are ready to show strength. What does that mean? We have to show that we are ready to retaliate with tariffs. We need a war room to fight back and protect jobs in Canada, and one that includes unions at the table who represent those workers. We need to show that this is a fight that's going to cost Americans and Canadians. It's going to hurt. So it's not a fight that Donald Trump wants to take.
On the checks, are you even gonna let any legislation on that come to the floor of the House if they don't expand it to meet your needs?
Yeah, we've been very clear on the checks. We do not believe that checks that exclude seniors and people living with disabilities are appropriate. We think it's wrong. And so we've said they've got to fix that. They've got to make sure that seniors get some support. It is wrong that someone earning $140,000 will get a check, but a senior living on their own, barely getting by, gets nothing. That is wrong. We made it clear.
If they don't, are you even going to let it get to the House? You didn't answer the question. Are you going to let it get to the floor of the House? The House is gridlocked right now. Are you even going to allow it to get to the House unless they meet your needs?
Yeah, we've been very clear. We're not going to support anything that excludes seniors.
Monsieur Singh, pour revenir sur le comité, la recommandation d'augmenter le nombre de professeurs musulmans, arabes, palestiniens, vous avez dit c'est pas ma position. Donc, vous n'êtes pas d'accord avec les députés de votre parti à ce comité-là qui, eux, sont d'accord avec cette recommandation. Vous dites c'est pas ma position, donc vous n'êtes pas d'accord avec ça?
Je dis que ce qu'on doit faire, c'est de regarder les rapports, regarder les suggestions, mais ce qui est primordial, c'est qu'on doit faire face à la haine. La haine, c'est un grand problème. Donc,
all right, more French, time to skip.
Is the fall economic statement. Have you made specific demands to the Liberals that you want to see specific measures in there to give your support for it?
For?
The fall economic statement.
What I understand, the fall economic statement is just an update. If there's going to be any legislation, we haven't seen it yet. We don't know if there's any legislation. We will make a determination on our support. like we said, by a case-by-case basis. So we'll look at any laws and decide, but so far we've not seen any heads up that there's going to be any laws presented.
Demands to support it. Like to her question, do you have?
I don't think I've not seen any votes that are coming forward. It's just an update as far as I know. If there's any votes, we'll take a look at it.
Voulez-vous que les investissements, les nouveaux...
Alrighty, I have had enough of Jagmeet's bullshit manipulation. So let's continue on to the House of Commons. Thank you all for joining. If you are here right now, let's take a listen.
Bringing to the attention of the government the RCMP's recent report that the government of India has interfered in Canada's elections and murdered, threatened, and extorted Canadians on Canadian soil. They're also indicating how deeply troubling they find that foreign interference is occurring in Canada. And they also mention that they're concerned that the leader of the Conservative Party has not received his security clearance. So the undersigned Canadians are calling upon the leader of the Conservative Party to get his security clearance and take the action.
Oh boy, here we go with the security clearance again.
In Canada and targeting Canadians. Thank you.
Presenting the petitions, the gentleman for Winnipeg North.
Oh, sit down, Kevin.
As coincidence has it, Mr. Speaker, I do have a petition on the very same issue, where what they're talking about, the petitioners, Mr. Speaker, is they're asking that the leader of the Conservative Party actually get the security clearance, given the issue of foreign interference.
So the best part about all of this is the, what is it, the CSIS or whatever it's called, has actually briefed Pierre Poilievre on the foreign interference case. They've actually given him details on this case, and the Liberals are still continuing to push this lie.
Party do the honorable thing and get the security clearance.
No, great petition.
Presenting petitions, the gentleman for Peace River Westlock.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank, or I want to present petitions on behalf of Canadians from across the country. The first petition I have to present today is from, are about the concerns around what's going on in Turkey, Pakistan, and Bahrain, where officials have.
As you can see right here, CSIS to brief Conservative leader Poilievre on national security threats despite his lack of special clearance. So they're continuing to just repeat the same things over and over again, even though he has been briefed, or is getting briefed.
Are calling on Canada to closely monitor this situation and to place sanction on 12 Turkish officials who are responsible for these atrocities, and they call on the Turkish, Pakistani, and Bahrain governments to end all violations against human rights happening in their country. The next petition I have, Mr. Speaker, comes from Canadians from across the country who are concerned with the attacks on religious freedom within the Canadian Armed Forces.
Yeah, every time the Liberals deny any accountability, shift the blame, and gaslight the Conservatives, they just make themselves look worse and worse. When the Conservatives ask time and time again that the Liberals produce documents that are unredacted, that is the main thing. The Liberals handed over thousands of pages, but they were completely blacked out, eliminating any factor of finding some sort of incriminating evidence or whatever the case is. They handed over thousands and thousands of these redacted papers. Hand over unredacted papers. Give people the real information. The Liberals continue to lie, manipulate, and gaslight. It is all they do.
Folks in this petition also note that vulnerable...
Trust me, I've been keeping an eye on this SDTC issue for over 2 months now.
These petitions also are concerned that medical assistance in dying risks normalizing suicide as a...
Yeah, the SDTC was Harper's fault. 100%.
...of Canada to support Bill C-314 to stop the expansion of medical assistance in dying to those with mental illness. The next petition that I have, Mr. Speaker, comes from Canadians from across the country who are in the support of the health and safety of Canadian firearm owners. Petitioners recognize the importance of owning firearms and they note that this is a part of our Canadian heritage. We also note that there is sometimes significant impact of hearing loss caused by the use of firearms, and they're calling for the Government of Canada to recognize the use of sound moderators as hearing protection devices in Canada. They're calling on the government to protect legal firearm owners by the use of these devices. So these are the petitions I have to present today. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Presenting a petition?
Well, that's the difference between me and the mainstream media. I don't have a teleprompter sitting in front of me telling what to say, telling me what narratives and bullshit to perpetuate. I just go off the top of my head. I speak freely. I don't really care. If you guys don't like what I have to say, that's completely up to you. At the end of the day, you are all freely allowed to speak your mind and chat as long as it's within YouTube TOS. I don't care.
The third and final report of the Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, which was tabled in the House of Commons earlier today. In brief, when the member from Eglinton Lawrence, then the Minister of Public Safety, appeared before the committee on April 26th of 2022, he made repeated assertions that the NDP Liberal government invoked the Emergencies Act at the request of law enforcement. This now infamous claim by the former minister, made at the committee table, went viral.
I believe a point of order, the honourable member from New.
Oh, a point of order. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always important to question a privilege. It's important to be factually correct. The minister wouldn't have referred to the NDP Liberal government, and so I would ask through you that the member respect the rules around a question of privilege and stick with the facts.
I appreciate the honourable member's intervention on that, and I will again just remind those who are presenting points of privilege here to be factual and, of course, as efficient as they can with the time they have before them, and stick to the facts themselves. The honourable member for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner.
Thank you, Speaker. This now infamous claim by the former minister, made at the committee table, went viral as police officer after police officer and official after official denied it before the committee, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, and the Public Order Emergency Commission. Documentary evidence further substantiated just how wrong the former minister's claim was. With all reports from all three bodies now formally before the House in the present session, the House is seized with irreconcilable claims for which the air must be cleared. As you know, it is a contempt to mislead the House of Commons or any of its committees. I will therefore argue that the member from Eglinton Lawrence deliberately misled the Special Joint Committee, giving rise to a prima facie contempt. The committee's third report details, in the first paragraph of the justification section of Chapter 7, under the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the former minister's evidence to the committee on April 26 of 2022, and I quote, "Some witnesses before the committee cited the public safety concerns as justification for a cabinet's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act. For instance, the former minister told the committee that the federal government received advice that law enforcement needed the Emergencies Act to be sure that they would resolve, for example, ambiguities around those who were staying close to ports of entry. He reiterated that we invoked the Act because it was the advice of nonpartisan professional law enforcement that existing authorities were ineffective at the time to restore public safety," end of quote. For good measure, Mr. Speaker, the former minister's other comments to the committee that night include the following, and I quote, "The government remained engaged with further enforcement throughout to ensure that they had the support and the resources they needed. However, when efforts using existing authorities proved ineffective, the advice we received was to invoke the Emergencies Act," end of quote. He went on to say, and I quote, "The advice we were getting was that law enforcement needed the Emergencies Act," end of quote.
We're talking about the
truckers? He also was
stated
as saying, and I quote, "As we took our decision in what we could do to respond, we were following the advice of various levels of law enforcement, including the RCMP and commissioners," end of quote. Now that last quote is particularly important, bearing in mind what the committee reported, beginning at the 10th paragraph of the section on cooperation among different levels of policing found in Chapter 5, Police Response to the Freedom Convoy, and I quote from that report, "There's evidence to suggest that police leadership had exhausted all available tools to bring the protests and blockades to their conclusion when the federal government decided to invoke the Emergencies Act. At the Public Order Emergency Commission, a 14th of February 2022 email from then Commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Luckie, to the Chief of Staff to the former minister stated, and I quote, "This said, I am of the view that we have not yet exhausted all available tools that are available through the existing legislation. There are circumstances where charges could be laid under existing authorities for various criminal code offences occurring right now in the context of the protest. The Ontario Provincial Emergencies Act just enacted will also help in providing additional deterrent tools to our existing toolbox. These existing tools are considered in our existing plans and will be used in the due course as necessary. End of quote. I want to pause here for a moment, Speaker, to note three things. First, on September the 22nd, 2022, the committee adopted a motion with a view to achieving efficiencies in its own proceedings to, and to quote the report, deem the evidence, including testimony and documents received by...
Yeah, no emergency act for the Indian Civil War that was breaking out in Brampton, but the people that were playing hockey outside of Parliament and handing out free coffee, oh my God, arrest every single one of them.
...to it, to have been received by this committee and may have been used in its reports. End of quote. Secondly, as we know from the Rillieux Commission records, the former minister's chief of staff forwarded the RCMP commissioner's message directly to the then minister. The email is Rillieux Commission document Sierra Sierra Mike dot SSM dot NSC dot CAN dot 0000228. And thirdly, Commissioner Lucky's statement about not exhausting all available tools was actually emboldened to attract the attention of the minister's eye with red lettering. So it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that the member from Eglinton Lawrence was put on clear notice that invoking the Emergencies Act was not the RCMP's advice, in sharp contrast to what he had claimed at the committee table. Now, going back to the third report, picking up 4 paragraphs later, we read, and I quote, then Ottawa Police Chief Peter Solly told the committee that the Ottawa Police Service had a plan.
So I feel like I need to point out here, the so-called conservative media channels simultaneously attacking freedom of speech. Here on YouTube, there's no such thing as freedom of speech. Here on YouTube, you can get banned for speaking your mind. So a lot of YouTube channels, including this one, have a bunch of words, a plethora of words that are censored, filtered, regulated due to YouTube's TOS, YouTube's guidelines. If you don't follow YouTube's guidelines and TOS, you can get banned. Not just my channel can get banned, but your account. That's something that people don't understand. People go into these chats speaking whatever the hell they want to, but they don't realize that people are watching, whether it's YouTube or whoever. You don't know who's watching this stream right now. Christ, I don't know who's watching the stream right now. These guidelines are very harsh and strict and set in stone. If you don't follow them, you're gone. That's kind of just the simple fact of the matter here. A place like Rumble, for example, doesn't really have those guidelines. You can pretty much get away with whatever you want on Rumble. But YouTube's a different story. YouTube, you have to play within their rules and limits, or you get canned.
Quote. The then Emergency Preparedness Minister, now the Minister of National Defence, testified on June 14th of 2022 at pages 22 and 23 of the evidence that he had not heard any advice or request from the police asking for the invocation of the Emergencies Act, adding, and I quote,
am I scared?
Quite
Fuck
frankly,
no.
I would have been
Jesus Christ.
quite surprised if the police had actually made a policy recommendation or asked for any legislative authority. End of quote. On October 26, 2022, then Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson confirmed at page 14 of the evidence that he had not sought any emergency declarations. On November 3rd of 2022, Ontario Police Commissioner Tom Corrick confirmed at page 17 of the evidence, and I quote, I can tell you that I am telling you the absolute truth, sir. At no point did I provide or request that Emergencies Act be invoked. End of quote. He then added, and I quote again, I did not provide any advice of that nature, nor am I aware of anyone from my legal team providing such advice. End of quote. Those statements alone, Mr. Speaker, show that there was irreconcilable evidence before the committee, which has now been reported to this House, But the concern just doesn't stop there. In parallel to the Special Joint Committee's work, our Procedure and House Affairs Committee was conducting its own study of security arrangements on or near Parliament Hill, hearing from a number of pertinent policing and security witnesses who appeared in the aftermath of the former minister's famous claim. The evidence which it heard was reported to the House in that committee's 19th report, tabled on December 14th of 2022. Firstly, on page 13, we read the former minister's own take, and I quote, "During the appearance by the then Ministers of Public Services and Procurement and Public Safety, some members of the committee asked questions about the invocation of the Emergencies Act. In particular, it was asked which police agency asked for the Emergencies Act to be invoked. In response, the member for Eglinton Lawrence stated that there was a very strong consensus among law enforcement that the Emergencies Act was necessary, as stipulated in the letter from the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police." End of quote. Then, turning to page 23 of the 19th report, we see, and I quote, "When asked about the invocation of the Emergencies Act by the federal government, then interim Ottawa Police Chief Steve Bell stated that the Ottawa Police Service, had had conversations with its partners and political ministries, but did not directly request that the Act be invoked." Chief Bell later testified before the Special Joint Committee on November 3rd of 2022 at page 2 of the evidence that, and I quote, "No, we never made a direct request for the invocation of the Act." End of quote. Later in that same meeting, at page 9, he confirmed, and I quote again, "That's correct. There was no direct request made from the Ottawa Police Service." End of quote. Now let's go back to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee's 19th report. We read on page 26, and I quote, "Asked whether the service of the police service of Gatineau was able to manage the disruptions in Gatineau caused by the Freedom Convoy, Service Director Luc Baudoin indicated that it was able to do so, in particular thanks to the collaboration of its partners and the Coordination Center." End of quote. Moving to page 29, we learn, and I quote, "When asked if the Parliamentary Protective Service had requested the invocation of the Emergencies Act on February of 2022, Service Acting Director Superintendent Larry Brooks answered no. He noted that there was no benefit whatsoever in the invocation of the Emergencies Act for PPS because it is not a policing organization, so it has received no additional powers through the Act." End of quote. I would pause here, Mr. Speaker, to add that Superintendent Brookson confirmed this evidence for the Special Joint Committee during his appearance there on September the 29th of 2022 at page 10 of the evidence. Mr. Slowly, the former Ottawa Police Chief, had also appeared before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, which reported at page 37, and I quote, "He did not ask the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act. He was not aware of anyone making that request within the Ottawa Police Service." End of quote. The then city manager of the City of Ottawa, Steve Kanellakis, was also a witness. And the 19th report, page 48, states, and I quote, "Mr. Kanellakis was asked by the committee whether the Ottawa Police Service had requested the invocation of the Emergencies Act. In response, he stated that he was not aware of any such request." End of quote. Mr. Kanellakis also said in his opening statement to the Special Joint Committee on October 26, 2022, at page 3 of the evidence, and I quote, "To my knowledge, the city never requested the invocation of the Act." End of quote. Next, Speaker, let's turn to the report of the Public Order Emergency Commission, which was tabled at in this House on February 17th, 2023, as sessional paper number 8530-441-17. First, on page 115 of Volume 1, Commissioner Rouleau wrote, and I quote, "A question that arose during the Commission's hearings was whether Cabinet was advised of Commissioner Lucky's view that not all existing tools had yet been exhausted in Ottawa. She had expressed this view to the former Minister's Chief of Staff less than an hour before Cabinet meeting began, but this was not passed on to Cabinet." End of quote. Later, the Commissioner expanded upon this at page 92 of Volume 3. A question that arose during the Commission's hearings was whether Cabinet was advised of Commissioner Lucky's view that not all existing tools had yet been exhausted in Ottawa. Less than an hour before the Cabinet meeting began, Commissioner Lucky responded to an email request from the former Minister's Chief of Staff, Mike Jones, for a list of emergency measures that might assist law enforcement in bringing the protests under control. Commissioner Lucky suggested a number of tools, but added that
yeah, those hockey games must have gotten really out of control.
existing legislation had not yet been exhausted. She noted that there were instances where charges could be laid under the criminal code, and that Ottawa's recent declaration of emergency would also help in providing additional tools. Mr. Jones forwarded Commissioner Lucky's email to the former minister and then Deputy Minister of Public Safety, Deputy Minister to Public Safety, Robert Stewart, half an hour before the Cabinet meeting began. The comment about the sufficiency of existing tools was not incorporated into the speaking notes that Commissioner Lucky sent to the former minister. And the then National Security and Intelligence Advisor.
Oh, don't get me started on the bouncy castles. Those were terrible. Those need to be banned nationwide.
Notes. In addition to these three reports, Mr. Speaker, the former minister testified to the Special Joint Committee is also contradicted by the government's response to order paper question number 613, signed by the then minister's parliamentary secretary. Through this written question, the government was asked, and I quote, "With regard to the government's invocation of the Emergencies Act earlier this year, did any police force make a request for the Act to be invoked? And if so, what are the specific details of any such requests, including which police forces submitted that request, and on what date each such request was received by the government?" End of quote. The then Parliamentary Secretary response danced around the heart of the question, but she nevertheless answered, and I quote, "The RCMP did not request for the Act to be invoked," end of quote. And she reiterated that quote with again, and I quote, "With regard to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police did not make a request for the Act to be invoked," end of quote. All in all, Mr. Speaker, the former minister's claim to the Special Joint Committee found in its report, which is now before the House, has been flatly contradicted by all other evidence on the question before the House. Now, the House of Commons Procedure and Practices, 3rd edition, at page 81, provides a list of established grounds for contempt, including, and I quote, "deliberately attempting to mislead the House or committee by way of a statement, evidence, or petition," end of quote. This point is reiterated again at page 112. For its part, United Kingdom House of Commons Committee on Privileges has also recently considered the matter of a minister misleading Parliament. That committee's 5th report, tabled in June of 2023, notes at paragraph 6 that, and I quote, "misleading intentionally or recklessly, refusing to answer legitimate questions, or failing to correct misleading statements impedes or frustrates the functioning of the House and is a contempt," end of quote.
It's something they always do.
The importance of accurate information being provided to Parliament has been underscored in a number of rulings in this House, including your predecessor on March 3rd of 2014 at page 3430 of the debates. It states, and I quote, "This incident highlights the primordial importance of accuracy and truthfulness in our deliberations. All members bear responsibility, individually and collectively, to select the words they use very carefully and to be ever mindful of the serious consequences that can result when this responsibility is forgotten," end of quote. The United Kingdom Privileges Committee, meanwhile, explained at paragraph 8 of its 4th report, tabled in March of 2023, that, and I quote, "the expectation is that when the House hears from ministers, what it hears is the truth as far as the minister knows it. The House considers legislation and scrutinizes government activity on the basis that what it is told is accurate. Parliament expects and requires proactive candor and transparency. This is what is necessary for the House to do its job properly. If a minister makes an inadvertent error, they are expected to correct it at the earliest opportunity. Mistakes inevitably happen, and corrections are made routinely. The more important the issue, the more seriously the House will take any questions of misleading." End of quote. There is a well-established test for determining whether deliberately misleading information has been provided, which, for example, you explained in the February 15th, 2024 ruling at page 21158 of the debates. And I quote, "It must be proven that the statement was misleading. It must be established that when making a statement, the member knew it to be incorrect. And finally, it must be demonstrated that the member intended to mislead the House." End of quote. In the circumstances, Mr. Speaker, I would respectfully submit that all three branches of this test can be made out. First, the overwhelming body of evidence, in fact, basically every source of evidence other than the former minister himself, which I have already quoted, contradicts the former minister. There can be no reasonable conclusion other than the fact that the former minister's statement to committee was misleading. Secondly, the email from the then RCMP commissioner to the former minister's chief of staff, who in turn forwarded it to his boss, makes it quite clear that the former minister was on notice of the actual opinion of the country's top cop. In the face of it, how could he plausibly claim that law enforcement actually made the request? And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the context of the former minister's comment and tried to manage concerns regarding an extra...
Yeah, Doug Ford honestly lost a lot of respect in my books during that time. I'm not going to lie about that. Like, it was pretty messed up. He bent the knee.
Explain the likely intention behind it. To syndicate the responsibilities for such a controversial decision onto the shoulders of non-political institutions like the police and away from the political actors who actually took the decision. In any event, intention is not something which I would respectfully submit requires, at this stage, ironclad proof, like a confession. Indeed, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, at paragraph 15 of its 50th report, presented in March of 2002, explicitly acknowledges that intention may well be a matter for committee investigation. And I quote that particular report. As the then Clerk of the House, William Corbett, explained to the committee, "It is not uncommon for inaccurate statements to be made in the course of debate or question period in the House. This issue is whether the statements were made deliberately with the intent of misleading the House or its members. In the case where a member later admits to having knowingly provided false information, as in the Profumo case, the issue of intent is clear. In the absence of such an admission, however, it rests with the committee to examine all of the circumstances and determine whether the evidence demonstrates an intention to mislead." End of quote. The Procedure and House Affairs Committee continued in the same vein at paragraph 39 of the same report, noting that at times inferences must be drawn to establish intent. And I quote that report again. "Intent is always a different element to establish in the absence of admission or confession. It is necessary to carefully review the context surrounding the incident involved and to attempt to draw inferences based on the nature of the circumstances. Any findings must, however, be grounded on facts and have an evidentiary basis." End of quote. At Westminster, meanwhile, the Privileges Committee, in its fourth report, wrote at paragraph 6, and I quote from that particular report, "If a statement was misleading, we will consider whether that was inadvertent, reckless, or intentional. If we conclude that it was in any way reckless or intentional, we will consider what sanction to recommend,
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you there, Spider-Man. This might be the longest question of privilege I have ever seen.
Recommendations." End of quote. It might also be worth noting here, Mr. Speaker, citing the related footnote in footnote 4 of that report, and I quote, "We emphasize that the committee is not a court of law. It is a select committee of Parliament, and its processes are parliamentary rather than forensic. The committee will adopt plain English definitions of key concepts as used in a parliamentary context." End of quote. The Parliamentary Privilege in Canada, second edition at page 234, explains, and I quote, "Before the House will be permitted by the Speaker to embark on a debate in such circumstances, it must be demonstrated that a member of the House of Commons was intentionally misled or an admission of the facts that leads naturally to the conclusion that a member was intentionally misled, end of quote. The long list of contradictory evidence, which I suggest lead naturally to the very strong inference, is not the conclusion that the Special Joint Committee was intentionally, if not the, sorry, I'll read that again, Speaker. The long list of contradictory evidence would, I suggest, lead naturally to the very strong inference, if not the conclusion, that the Special Joint Committee was intentionally misled. Next, Speaker, I wish to address another matter concerning this question of privilege, namely the requirement to rise in a timely manner. On first blush, raising a concern about something which was said over 31 months ago would not be considered timely. However, since it happened in a committee, the clock only started from the moment the third report was tabled in the House, which was this morning. It would have been premature to have raised this concern any sooner. As Mr. Speaker Reagan said on September 27th of 2016 at page 5175 of the debates, and I quote, "The Speaker cannot pass judgment on matters that are not properly before the House. The authority of the Speaker is limited to studying evidence before the House, such as statements made in the House or matters detailed in reports from committees, and not evidence gleaned from other sources," end of quote. Your immediate predecessor held on May 11th of 2021 at page 7023 of the debates, and I quote, "There is no precedent where the chair has used testimony from a committee without there being a report on the subject," end of quote. This rationale was more fully elaborated by Speaker Milliken on February 10th of 2011 at page 8030 in a comment quite relevant to the present case, given the former minister's wild claim became a matter of considerable discussion on the floor of the House. And I quote from that particular ruling. "The chair was limited in its ability to act on the full range of that review, since much of the proceedings referred to in member submissions were never officially placed in the hands of the House. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader was not mistaken in..."
She put $29 million towards the border. That's pretty good. It's not bad. We need to get actual people working there, though. And I know the money could go towards salaries to pay for that, but we need people that are willing to actually work the job. Real qualified people as well, not just DEI hires.
Fully and properly.
It's the last thing we need, DEI border workers.
Now, the information is fully before the House and squarely before the House in the form of the third report, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee's 19th report, the Reload Commission's report, as well as the order paper question response, which I quoted. We are now faced with the concern expressed by one of your predecessors on March 3rd of 2014 at page 3430 of the debates, and I quote, "At the same time, the fact remains that the House continues to be seized of completely contradictory statements. This is a difficult position in which to leave members, who must be able to depend on the integrity of the information with which they are provided to perform their parliamentary duties," end of quote. In that case, the chair found a prima facie case of privilege, just as Speaker Milliken did on February 1st of 2002 at page 8581 of the debates, when he said, and I quote, "The authorities are consistent about the need for clarity in our proceedings and about the need to ensure the integrity of the information provided by the government to the House."
Nah, honestly, the word racist has lost all meaning in today's day and age with how much it gets thrown around and misused.
Importance, since it directly concerns the rules of engagement for Canadian troops involved in the conflict in Afghanistan, a principle that goes to the very heart of Canada's participation in the war against terrorism. In deciding on alleged questions of privilege, it is relatively infrequent for the chair to find prima facie privilege. It is more likely that the Speaker will characterize the situation as a dispute as to facts. But in the case before us, there appears to be, in my opinion, no dispute as to the facts. I believe that both the Minister and the honourable members recognize that the two versions of events have been presented to the House. On the basis of the arguments presented by honourable members and in view of the gravity of the matter, I have concluded that the situation before us, where the House is left with two versions of events, is one that merits further consideration by an appropriate committee, if only to clear the air, end of quote. At the same time, or the same motivation,
Dirka, Muhammad Jihad.
Prima facie finding by the chair in March 9th of 2011, as well as the 2014 case, as I cited. Now, while the present circumstances do not relate to Canadian participation in conflict abroad, they do relate to the justification for the invocation of the Emergencies Act, a decision which allowed Cabinet to legislate without regard to the authority of Parliament or to the usual constitutional divisions of power. A decision of this magnitude must be supported with clarity and integrity of information, just as Speaker Milliken had insisted concerning the deployment of JTF-2 soldiers in Afghanistan. Speaker, I would submit that the necessary thresholds have been made out here, allowing for you to make a prima facie finding. In order to allow for the air to be fully and properly cleared, I intend to propose referring the matter to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee so that we might get a definitive response, a report on the issue. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, Parliament deserves to receive clear and definitive answers to questions. It must be entitled to the truth.
Man, if you guys don't get that reference, I gotta recommend Team America. I think that's what it's called. Team America World Police, I believe, right? Team America World Police. That movie is fantastic.
Testimony to the Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, for which I am prepared to move an appropriate motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member, and we're going to see if there's any input on this particular privilege motion. The honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll have to review the matter in terms of the way in which it was presented.
Wow, that guy finally finished talking, and I know nobody wants to listen to Kevin, so I will say this. Thank you all for being here right now. Question period is going to be happening or starting very soon. I do agree. Canada does need DOGE. Canada needs a Department of Government Efficiency, and we need a department that will keep the government accountable. They just keep promising all these things, and they never deliver.
Question of privilege raised by the Conservative member from Thornhill a few days ago, and I wanted to start by referencing, Mr. Speaker, the fact that when we look at prima facie cases of privilege on obstruction, in every case that has been adjudicated by this House, I'm thinking of the member from Milton in 2017, the member from Toronto Danforth in 2015, the member from Skeena Bulkley Valley in 2015, the member from Acadie Bathurst in 2014, the member from Winnipeg Centre in 2012, the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development in 2011, and the member from Montmorency, Charlevoix, Haute-Côte-Nord in 2004. In every single case, the question of privilege was raised the same day.
It looks like Chris Ruth, the Chinese communist, is back. Welcome back, Trudeau Dick Rider.
Hill. She waited 4 days before she rose in this House, and she rose in this House to obstruct the member from Burnaby South, who was speaking on the NDP opposition day. The reality is this type of weaponizing of the question of privilege is yet another example of how Conservatives are disregarding the standing orders that we have that clearly govern our activities, Mr. Speaker, and the fact that she added to the...
Yeah, we get a lot of Chinese bots in this chat, trust me. The chat is always on the offense. Or the defense, sorry.
...by the member from Edmonton Strathcona, the member from Winnipeg Centre, and the member from Hamilton Centre. I also think is very clear that this was a weaponizing of the question of privilege, a frivolous, yet again, from the member from Thornhill, a frivolous question of privilege. She's certainly done this before. And I wanted to raise two citations from our procedural Bible, which is, of course, what governs our activities in the House, Mr. Speaker. First, referencing in Speaker Milliken's decision back in November 5th, 2009. Speaker Milliken had occasion at that time to rule on a strikingly similar incident referenced a number of other incidences where there were false allegations of a member having knowledge of or were complicit in a disturbance in the galleries. In all of those cases, Mr. Speaker, Speaker Milliken promptly ruled that it wasn't a question of privilege. And this is another example of this, though in the case of the member from Thornhill, the fact that she sat on it for 4 days very clearly shows that it wasn't a question of privilege that is bona fide. Now, Mr. Speaker, the member from South Shore of St. Margaret's rose to say that he had to postpone.
You support the NDP, so you're a champagne socialist then. Got it.
Weaponization of the question of privilege solely designed to block the member from Burnaby South from speaking on the NDP opposition day. And I wanted to reference again a House of Commons procedure and practice which states the following. In order to find a prima facie breach of privilege, the Speaker must be satisfied that there is evidence to support the member's claim that he or she has been impeded in the performance of his or her parliamentary functions and that the matter is directly related to a proceeding in Parliament. The fact that a stakeholder postponed a meeting is not directly related to proceedings in Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And so I contrast that, of course, with how the Conservatives acted when we had the takeover of downtown Ottawa. 600 businesses closed, seniors not being able to get access to their groceries, people with disabilities not being able to access their medications, a complete calamity. We saw those businesses that flew a pride flag being vandalized, windows broken, the Happy Goat Company, for example.
Boo-hoo?
Vandalized by these convoy extremists. And at no point, despite the fact...
Convoy extremists.
Through every day with the obstruction and intimidation and insults that were and jeers that were thrown at members of Parliament. At no point did Conservatives want to entertain any sort of question of privilege there. That is a case where there were severe restrictions on parliamentary activity. The case of the member from Thornhill is simply ludicrous. The fact that she sat on it for 4 days, that she's trying to weaponize a question of privilege, should be treated, I think, as what it is, very clearly, after the throwing of false allegations, not responding in any material way, in any factual way, with actually what transpired. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have heard from the member from Winnipeg Centre, we have heard from the member from Edmonton Strathcona, we have heard from the member from Hamilton Centre. In each case, those members have repudiated the false allegations that were made that day. And Mr. Speaker, the fact that this weaponizing of a question of privilege raised days after the fact was solely intended to block the member from Burnaby South to speaking on the NDP's opposition day, which you'll recall, Mr. Speaker, touched on GST.
Yes, I feel like I need to point out that the classic liberal is way different than this new age extremist, air quotations, liberal that this new generation has created. By the way, most of this insanity and extremist liberalism started in the 90s, so...
Obstruction that day obstructed the member from Burnaby South's ability to intervene and raised what was a series of speeches, none of which touched on in any way, in a meaningful way, on the question of privilege. So, Mr. Speaker, I submit to you that
a lot of the politically correct garbage started happening in the 90s, heavily in the late 90s.
Completely repudiated. And what that...
it shows a lot through entertainment specifically.
Is a rejection, yet again, of the member from Thornhill, yet again, raising a frivolous question of privilege, yet again, and trying to weaponize question of privilege. I would implore...
Never said I was a classical liberal, Chris Ruth. You stupid hassa.
Yes, the procedures that govern us, the values and traditions that govern us in this place, and to stop making a mockery of the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby for his intervention on this question of privilege. Colleagues, we are now moving into the period for statements by members. The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to highlight the relentless efforts of Canada's only non-profit organization focused on advancing Lyme disease research located in Vaughan, the G. Magnata Foundation. A deeply personal cause to the founder and president, my dear friend, Rosanna Magnotta, who after losing her beloved husband Gabe to Lyme disease, has rallied our community to raise awareness, fund research, improve testing, and Lyme disease treatment for all Canadians. Just a few weeks ago, the G. Magnata Foundation renewed its commitment to Lyme disease research with a $2 million gift over the next 2 years to the G. Magnata Lab at the University of Guelph. Along with dozens of friends and neighbours, on September 18th, I joined Rosanna and Lab Director Dr. Melanie Wills at the annual Vaughan Walk for Lyme to show our community's hope and resolve to combat this terrible disease. Embodying the G. Magnata Lab's mantra, driven by passion, fueled by philanthropy, the unmatched generosity of Vaughan residents is once again a beacon of hope for a healthier future for all. Thank you to Rosanna, the entire team of the G. Magnata Foundation for their leadership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're here.
The honourable member for Moose Jaw Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Mr. Speaker, in 1994, my mother visited me when I was living and studying in England. We toured Canterbury Cathedral, where she wrote out a prayer request. That prayer has stayed with me from that moment on. Her prayer was salvation for my family. The true gift of salvation came as a baby born in a manger in Bethlehem over 2,000 years ago. It is a gift if you acknowledge who that baby was and became to be and what he did on the cross for you and me. His name was Jesus, Emmanuel, God is with us. Christmas won't be the same without Mom and Dad this year, having lost them both in October, but they lived lives of faith and knew Christ. But I know hope still remains. The reminder of the gift of salvation comes every Christmas. And so I want to let everyone here who hears my voice, I want to wish them a very Merry Christmas and a very Scottish Happy Hogmanay. God bless you. Have a Merry Christmas. You are not alone.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Milton.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It's a real privilege to highlight two incredible organizations in Milton that are making a profound difference in our community. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Special Friends Network and their inspiring Dream Kitchen initiative. By partnering with the Halton Down Syndrome Association, Chef Brandon Bousfield and team are creating opportunities for those with special needs to develop employable skills, build confidence, and create lasting friendships. With help from the Milton Optimist Club, they're delivering some of those meals that they create to people who need a little bit of help over these holidays. I also want to commend the Jagmeet Singh Foundation on their 16th Miracle on Main event. It was amazing, Mr. Speaker. It included a toy and a food drive, and it's a true testament to the spirit of giving and celebration. It's very heartwarming to see local families, businesses, and volunteers all come together to ensure that every family in Milton and across Halton region have a really enjoyable Christmas holiday season. Both organizations embody the true meaning of community, compassion, generosity, and care, and I'm so proud to support the work they do, and so grateful to everyone in Milton for building a brighter place for everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Really looking forward to seeing everybody this year.
The honourable member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, on December 4th, my great riding of Lac Saint-Jean held the annual, the inaugural opening of a new business, an investment of $25 million at a time when the forestry sector is facing a number of problems. This is a source of pride and optimism to see such a project go forward in Saint-Monique. And it's a relief for the mayor, for the workers, and for the entire community. This business, which has very modern equipment, will be able to use wood fiber in an optimal way to increase its productivity and develop new products. I obviously want to congratulate Mr. Louis Fresne, Mr. Laberge, and the entire team at Monosera who have put in place this vision. With this project, Monosera will be a keystone.
Herkle dirking and circle jerking, the House of Commons' favorite activities.
The Honourable Member for Orléans.
Mr. Speaker, as 2024 comes to an end, I want to extend my warmest wishes to everyone in this House and to the people of Orléans. As the representative of the most beautiful riding in Canada, I want to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of the residents of Orléans. Your unwavering support, your leadership, and your dedication to our community have made a profound impact. Together, we've built a strong and vibrant community that I'm proud to represent. J'espère que cette
I hope that this holiday season will bring you peace and joy, and that you will enjoy the time spent with loved ones.
To a fantastic start to 2025, a year of new opportunities, dream realized, and continued success. Joyeuse fête.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holiday, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, happy New Year, bonne année, Orléans.
Happy New Year, Orléans.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
After 9 years, this Liberal government has unleashed crime and chaos from coast to coast to coast. Nationwide, violent crime has skyrocketed by 50% since this Prime Minister took office, while violent gun crime has increased by 116%, using weapons smuggled over our insecure border. Let's look at the numbers closer to home. In Saskatoon, crime has absolutely exploded, and it is the result of the decisions of this out-of-touch NDP government. Violent crime is out of control. For youth, it is up over 113% since 2019 alone, and assaults and robberies that saw the largest increase. In 2024 was already the worst year on record for Saskatoon in terms of number of murders, and the year isn't over yet. The NDP Liberal coalition does not care at all about victims. Only common sense Conservatives will bring home safe streets by securing our border and giving jail, not bail, to violent repeat offenders.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, today I rise to pay tribute to the Honourable Ray Startini, who recently passed away. Ray became one of the first judges of Italian descent appointed to the bench in Ontario. He was a champion for fair representation and legal aid. He was proud of his Italian heritage and West End upbringing in the Sioux. He shared his traditions, stories, and experience by documenting them and publishing several books. He was a force outside of the courtroom, actively volunteering on many community boards, including the Soup Kitchen, Ken Brown Recovery Home, Algoma University, YMCA, Children's Aid Society, Algoma Public Health Unit, and the St. Joseph Islands Lions Club. And a family man, a dedicated husband, a husband that was always there for his wife, there for his 4 children, and their 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Ray's motto was, "Leave the wood pile higher than you found it." Truly a Northern Ontario great. Thank you, Ray, for your lifetime of service. I want to say thanks, thanks. You will always be remembered. Grazie.
Arrivederci. The Honourable Member for Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in Brampton, safety is a major concern. Community safety must be our top priority. Doug Ford's government should make it their priority as well. Instead, they have been blaming the federal government for their failure. The government of Ontario needs to get their acts together. But according to CBC investigative report, since 2020, 56% of charges in Ontario get withdrawn, stayed, dismissed, or discharged before going to trial. We have passed tougher bail laws, created new offenses, and tougher penalties. We also gave them $121 million to help prevent gun and gang control. It's time for the province of Ontario to take action, stop playing blame games, and provide money for the policing and the justice system.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lilley-Kamouraska.
You ever end up driving through Brampton, make sure you have a dash cam. A lot of insurance fraud happens there.
Canadians are once again going to suffer the consequences of this Liberal government's lack of leadership. The Prime Minister is in a fiscal feud with his Finance Minister, who will definitely blow past the $40 billion deficit limit, a limit that she promised herself. Mr. Speaker. They've broken yet another promise. It's become the Liberals' signature move. The Prime Minister imposes inflationary policies, then gets angry with his minister when, surprise, surprise, she's unable to manage Canada's economy. And who's going to replace the Finance Minister after she's dropped by the Prime Minister? None other than Mr. Mark Carney, an unelected person responsible for the carbon tax who has already hurt Canadians with this irresponsible and inflationary tax.
Yeah, trust me, I stay far away from Brampton as I possibly can. I have no reason to go there.
Stop all this spending, stop raising taxes, stop feeding inflation, stop digging us into a deficit. It's not complicated. Just stop.
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
Order.
The honourable member for Sydney, for Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, on November 30th, I was honored to attend the signing of the Red River Métis Self-Government Recognition and Implementation Treaty in Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Red River Métis with the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations. Mr. Speaker, it was the first of its kind. This co-developed modern treaty will recognize the Manitoba Métis Federation as the government of the Red River Métis with an inherent right to self-government and lawmaking powers over its own citizenship, election, and other internal operations. Furthermore, this signing marks an important milestone on the path of reconciliation as
Well, the way I look at it is most people who want to come to Canada are either going to move to Ontario or BC. They're not going to go to, like, Yukon. They're not going to go to Nunavut. They're not going to go to Halifax or Labrador, right? Like, they're not going to go to those smaller provinces or less known provinces. They're going to go to the heavy hitters. So most people end up in Eastern Canada.
River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. He forced his Finance Minister to blow through his ridiculously high $40 billion guardrail, and now he's getting ready to throw her off the fiscal cliff so he can replace her with his...
I actually meant Western Canada, but technically Ontario's in the center, so that's not really east or west. And when it comes to places like Alberta, I don't think anybody really wants to go there unless you are working in the oil fields or something like that. So I don't really know. I'm here in Ontario personally. I can't speak for places other than Ontario. But if you Google, you go on Twitter or whatever, you go to like BC, you search up some stuff going on there. BC is a shithole. Vancouver is an absolute nightmare of a place to live. What used to be probably one of the most beautiful provinces in all of Canada is easily one of the worst. BC, David Eby, absolutely has destroyed BC. It's just Northern California at this point.
Hastings, Lennox, and Addington.
This Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and this week this Prime Minister's fake feminism was on spectacular display. He is smashing Canada through $40 billion fiscal guardrail and pushing his female Finance Minister off the glass cliff to make way for carbon tax Carney. He did it with his Justice Minister, he did it with the Treasury Board President, and now he's doing it to the Finance Minister after crushing the $40 billion safeguard she put in place. Just 2 days ago, he stood in a room full of equality stakeholders and advocates and said, "I am and always will be a proud feminist." It is beyond insulting that he says this as he actively plots to destroy the $40 billion fiscal guardrail, replace his female Finance Minister with an unelected stooge, while blaming the women around him for his poor choices. Pure hyper-hypocrisy. Mr. Speaker, this fake feminist Prime Minister is not a feminist. He's an opportunist, and he's not worth the cost.
I would just like to remind members about a ruling that I said before about people who are outside of Parliament to make sure that they are judicious in their choice of words, especially since they can't be here to defend themselves. The honourable member for Surrey Newton.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to rise today
to highlight the affordability measures our government is implementing to help Canadians save more money of their hard-earned money. Starting on December the 14th, the new GST HST tax break will allow Canadians to keep more money in their pockets during holiday season. Additionally, we celebrated a significant milestone in affordability and health care this week, the one-year anniversary of the Canadian Dental Care Plan. Since its launch, over 1.2 million Canadians have received vital dental care. Before the CDCP, 1 in 4 Canadians skipped dental visits due to financial constraints. Cost should never be a barrier to health care in Canada, and we remain committed to ensure.
Man, this guy's voice cracks more than mine.
For all, and I wish all my constituents and all Canadians a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Order. The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak about my friend, my former MLA, my constituent, a proud resident of Langford, and the 36th Premier of BC, the Honourable John Horgan. On Sunday, I'll be attending the memorial service for John, where we will gather to honour the lasting legacy he leaves for his family, his community, and our beautiful province. I had the privilege of knowing John for almost 20 years, and I have a lot of fond memories of our relationship. He was an excellent purveyor of dad jokes, often repeating them again and again. Among my favorites was his quip in our region about having to drive west to get to East Souk, drive east to get back to the West Shore, and drive north to get to South Cowichan. The relationship we enjoyed didn't change when he was Premier. Even when he was at a busy community event surrounded by people, he would always make sure to point me out, saying, "Hey, there's my MP." John, you were one of a kind. I will sincerely miss you.
Order. The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, the ACEF in Longueuil is celebrating 50 years of community involvement as an organization that defends consumer rights and promotes financial education. Since 1974, ACEF has supported thousands of local citizens by helping them manage their personal finances, by fighting for responsible consumption, and through their consultations, workshops, and awareness-raising initiatives, ACEF has established itself as a key ally in promoting financial independence and debt prevention. With a committed and caring team, ACEF in Longueuil stands out for its human and personalized approach, offering indispensable support for people when they're in times of vulnerability. This anniversary is an opportunity to salute the tireless work of their staff and volunteers, as well as the profound impact that ACEF has had on the lives of so many families. Today, we are celebrating half a century of solidarity and dedication in the service of the community, and we wish ACEF continued inspiration and continued support towards a more serene financial future for the people of Longueuil. Happy 50th anniversary to the ACEF Longueuil.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. Next week's fall update is teeing up to be yet another dramatic disaster because at this point, we're not even sure who the Finance Minister is going to be by Monday. The Globe and Mail reports that tensions between the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister have never been worse and getting more intense by the day. She wanted to run a gigantic $40 billion deficit, which she called her guardrail. Now the Prime Minister is pushing her through that guardrail and over the fiscal cliff. And now he learned he wants to humiliate her further by firing her and replacing her with carbon tax Carney. Even Liberal MPs are calling all this chaos out by saying, quote, "The federal budget is not an unlimited pot and we need to show fiscal restraint." Well, that's a little late after 9 years. Yeah. This week, Prime Minister has lost control of immigration, borders, spending, inflation, the debt, and even his ministers. Common sense Conservatives on this side, meanwhile, are fully united behind our leader and ready for a carbon tax election.
The honourable member for Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker,
This holiday, our government followed through on its promise to put more money back into the pockets of Canadians. With a tax cut for everyone, we're making sure businesses can succeed and families can have a little less stress this holiday season. The Conservative leader's response? Instead of supporting Canadian workers, the Conservatives are prepared to cut essential services like childcare, healthcare, and pensions, services that Canadians depend on every day while doing nothing to reduce costs for families. Canadians deserve better than what the Conservatives are proposing. Our tax cut announcement is a perfect example of how our government is ensuring that workers and families can afford what they need and have saved for what they want, while Conservatives shout empty promises. That's right.
Questions orales.
Alrighty.
Questions.
About time.
For Regina Capel. Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and the fiscal feud over the $40 billion guardrail is worse than we ever thought. New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, carbon tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff. Does the Finance Minister still have her hands on the wheel, and will the deficit be below that $40 billion guardrail?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the first question from the Conservatives relates to the economy and the Finance Minister. Let's talk about the work she's been doing on behalf of Canadians. Yesterday, we had a 50 basis point interest rate cut announced by the Bank of Canada. That was the 5th time in a row, leading the entire G7, we've seen the interest rates come down from the Bank of Canada. On Saturday, we have a further great news for details for Canadians, which is a GST tax cut on basic essentials for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast. That's groceries, that's things that you buy for your kids for Christmas. That's great news for Canadians under the leadership of this Finance Minister.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Even the bank admitted that they had to cut rates because the economy is performing so poorly under this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And, you know, Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney. A classic example of an incompetent boss blaming subordinates. Does the Finance Minister not realize that she's about to join a long list of cabinet ministers that have had their careers and their reputations ruined by this Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that he's talking about the Bank of Canada, because what has the actual Bank of Canada governor said recently? He said, quote, CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. On inflation, what has Tiff Macklamachi said? Quote, we are no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against us getting inflation down. We have brought it down. That's the handiwork of this finance minister and this government.
That's not something to be proud of. Only since the summer has this taken place. You've had 10 years. You've had 10 bloody years.
A little further, he'd read that it's not because of anything the government's been doing except causing our economy to slow down and underperform. That's why they've taken this step. But you know, a guardrail is something you're supposed to stay far away from. If you even brush up against it, it's a sign you're way off track. If you smash through it, you go flying off a cliff. Now, even Liberal MPs are terrified and are ringing the bell, trying to get off before they smash through the guardrail. One of them said, quote, I think that if we state that we have a $40 billion guardrail, we better stay within those numbers. And another is begging for a fiscally responsible framework. Will the Prime Minister allow a free vote, or will he force his Liberal MPs to stay on that bus as it goes down the cliff?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, allow me to reference not just what the domestic Bank of Canada is talking about, but let's talk about what the IMF is stating. The IMF is projecting that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 on average in 2023 and 2024. Canada is expected to maintain its position as the country with the smallest deficit as a share of GDP among G7 countries, and still by far the lowest general government net debt as a share of GDP in the G7. What's up, Mr. Speaker? Canada's growth and leadership of the G7. That's what's up, and we're proud of it.
Actually, the Bank of Canada yesterday, we watched this. The guy claimed that we are performing worse than usual. Our quarter every quarter we have performed negatively, and only now are we seeing a slow increase. Emphasis on slow.
The Prime Minister, a fake feminist, by the way.
Varani might be one of the worst liars and one of the most frequent liars of the Liberals. He does it every time.
An elected man who is already pulling the strings behind the scenes. Order. The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no lessons to learn from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the economy, Canadians have seen the work put forward by the Liberal government. A key interest rate at 3.25%, Mr. Speaker. A key interest rate that will help families, that will help SMEs, that will help our business people. Soon, there will be a GST vacation. It's Christmas time. I know the Conservatives. I'm sure they have a good heart. Let's celebrate Canadians and our entrepreneurs, and let us celebrate this reduction in the key interest rate. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, now we've seen it all. An incompetent Prime Minister who is pushing his Finance Minister to run up a staggering $40 billion deficit. And now, he's blaming her for his failure and is replacing her with an unelected man. And all the while, he struts around equal voice, claiming to be a proud feminist. What hypocrisy! Will the Prime Minister finally admit that his minister is a mere facade now, because he is forcing her to break her promise to respect the $40 billion deficit ceiling? Order, please. Order. The Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Oceans and Coast Guards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see that they've learned their lessons across the way. I don't have to repeat myself, but we have a member from the opposition, a Conservative, a woman who comes from Quebec. How can that kind of person attack our Minister of Finance, who has implemented the Canadian childcare benefit? I hate to interrupt questions, I hate to interrupt answers, but I must ask the member for Louis Saint-Laurent and the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier to please not order on both sides. Minister. I will ask the Minister for Fisheries and Oceans and Coast Guards to start from the top. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if there are Conservative men on the other side who are heckling, that doesn't bother me at all, Mr. Speaker. Women are the ones who tackle men head on. And shame on the opposition, because we have a woman from Quebec, a colleague, and she dares attack our Minister for Finance, who has implemented programs like the Canadian childcare benefit, programs that help women when it comes to childcare, Mr. Speaker. We've implemented programs to help children. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Normally, it is here in this House that important votes should take place, but today it's happening in the Senate. Senators will vote upon an amendment that would sabotage C-282 and prevent it from protecting supply management. The non-elected senators will be voting whether or not to respect the desire of elected representatives from all parties to protect our farmers in trade agreements. Has the Prime Minister contacted each of his Senate appointments to tell them to vote on the right side of history, the side of democracy? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with my colleague. Something important is happening in the Senate today. I would like to remind her, however, that now, under a Liberal government, the Senate is filled with independent senators. However, Conservative senators, they have to toe the party line. So I'd be curious to hear what they have been imposed. In any case, Mr. Speaker, you know that we have worked hard to transmit good information to senators, and we hope that they have understood how important supply management is for Canada and for Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order, please. The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. I appeal to all party leaders. Each and every one of them voted to protect supply management in trade agreements through Bill C-282. But today, senators will vote either to respect our will or to overturn the decision in a complete breach of the very basic principles of democracy. Leaders, the farmers of your ridings are watching you closely. Will all party leaders, starting with the Prime Minister, ask senators to defeat the amendment and pass C-282 in its entirety by Christmas? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supply management is something we believe in. We will continue to protect it. We've also committed to reducing our market share. We have done everything possible to go to the very end of this bill and see it adopted because it is essential. We have to be careful, Mr. Speaker. This bill protects our producers and farmers, but until there is a government that will get rid of supply management. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, we have to protect supply management for farmers and producers in Quebec and throughout the country. Emergency rooms are overflowing. People can't even find a family doctor. The governments in Ottawa and Quebec aren't doing what's needed, and what's more, the private sector is too expensive, it doesn't even work. Therefore, we have fewer services for Quebecers. Let us be clear, Mr. Speaker. Profit has absolutely no place in our healthcare system. It is up to the governments of Quebec and Ottawa to ensure fast and fair access to healthcare. Why aren't the Liberals doing anything at all to defend access to healthcare services for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, absolutely we are here to defend our universal healthcare system, and this from coast to coast to coast. That is the reason for which we have signed an agreement with every single province and every single territory to the tune of $200 million to improve our healthcare system. Absolutely. Provinces and territories have their responsibilities, but we will always be here to make sure that people can get healthcare.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, last night the Prime Minister met with the Premier to discuss Trump's tariffs. Canadian workers were not consulted, and yet it's their jobs that are at risk. Instead of waiting for the next threat for Trump or Premiers running off with their own plans, why not create a Canadian plan that protects and increases our jobs? The Conservatives parrot Trump's talking points even after they fired 1,100 border officers when they were in power. Canada needs to turn the tables on President-elect Trump by promoting Canadian jobs and a workers' plan in manufacturing and natural resources. They have Buy America. Where's our Buy Canada?
You literally voted to keep Trudeau in power. Sit down, buddy.
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians can count on our government to play as Team Canada to defend Canada's interests. Prime Minister met with the First Ministers yesterday. I proudly can say in this House that I, along with my colleagues, have met with Canadian workers all across the country from coast to coast to coast to reiterate how important this trading relationship is. Their voices, workers' voices, business voices, and all of our voices matter in this important relationship, and we're going to keep working hard to make sure that this continues to work for Canada.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. The Finance Minister promised to cap the deficit at already reckless $40 billion, but now it turns out the Prime Minister is shoving her through her own guardrail. The fake feminist Prime Minister is setting up Canada's first female finance minister to take the hit for his reckless spending, so that he can then officially bring in the unelected man who has been pulling the strings. Why is the Prime Minister bullying the Finance Minister into breaking her $40 billion deficit guardrail promise and forcing her to deliver carbon tax Carney's fiscal update?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
While the Conservatives are focused on this soap opera, Parliament Hill, grapevine, gossip, Mr. Speaker, our Liberal government has been focused on the pocketbooks of Canadians. Inflation is
taken money from the pocketbooks of Canadians.
Confirmed yesterday that it's going to stay at about 2% for the next few years. Interest rates are way down. We saw another jumbo rate cut yesterday, Mr. Speaker.
After
that
10
means
years?
More money in the pockets of Canadians because they're going to be able to renegotiate their mortgage at a lower rate. We're going to be able to help all Canadians that have loans, and our small businesses and entrepreneurs are going to see costs going down.
After you shut down the whole country and absolutely annihilated the small business?
Canadians cannot afford this Prime Minister's fake feminism. He had the gall this week to say, and I want you to know that I am and I always will be a proud feminist. You will always have an ally in me and my government. All while working overtime behind the scene to throw Canada's first female finance minister under the bus for his reckless spending. Will the so-called feminist Prime Minister set aside his hypocrisy and admit that he is responsible for forcing the Finance Minister to break her $40 billion deficit promise?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I was also at the Equal Voice Gala the other night, and I heard the Prime Minister's speech. I heard him talk about all the tangible measures that we have taken as a government to advance equal rights among genders, including a gender-neutral cabinet, including $10 a day childcare, including a women's entrepreneurship strategy. I also heard the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives and her speech, which completely undermined the whole...
I really do apologize. I've been having trouble hearing the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary answer the question. Members really must not take the floor when others are speaking. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I was also at the Equal Voice Gala the other night, and I truly enjoyed the Prime Minister's speech, which listed dozens of things that we have tangibly done as a government to advance gender equality, including a cabinet that has equal numbers of men and women, including $10 a day childcare, including a female entrepreneurship strategy, $500 million going out across the country to end the process of gender-based violence. Meanwhile, the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives in her speech completely undermined the whole point of equal voice, Mr. Speaker. It's very telling about what the Conservatives think about equality.
Order. The Honourable Member from Peterborough-Kawartha.
This fake feminist Prime Minister is determined to decimate Canadians' lives by destroying the economy, and he will throw anyone under the bus to do it, including his token finance female minister. Canadians know he's weak. They know he's lost control of his cabinet and his spending. The question is, will the first ever female finance minister have the courage to stand up to that fake feminist Prime Minister and stick to her promised $40 billion deficit?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, here's something tangible that the Leader of the Opposition could do. In the next election, he could run more women, and he could get more women in those seats. If he really wants to prove his credibility in terms...
Why don't we get people in the seats that are qualified for the job, no matter what their gender is? By the way, there's only 2 genders.
% of the women elected sit here in the Liberal benches. How many in the Conservative benches, Mr. Speaker? 6%. That's the kind of numbers that we are talking about.
Order. I'm certain all members want to hear the question from the honourable member. The honourable member from Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, on the Conservative side of the House, women stand here because we're skilled and we're allowed to use our voice.
Whoa, just cooked her.
Mr. Speaker, Jody Wilson-Raybould is testament to this. That is a fake Prime Minister, but that is not the point. We're not here to talk about gender. We're here to talk about the economy, and it is destroyed under that fake feminist Prime Minister. So again, if she is not a token, will she stand up to him and say, no, I will abide by my $40 billion deficit guardrail to help this economy get back on track and save Canadians' lives?
I know that all members are keen to return back to their constituencies for the Christmas break, but until that point, please, let us treat each other with respect. And that means not speaking when the Speaker is standing or when someone is recognized by the Speaker to take the floor. The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, that woman might feel like a token, but I never do. I earned my seat in this House of Commons, and I'm proud of it, Mr. Speaker. And you know why they don't like numbers, Mr. Speaker? Because the numbers don't speak in their favour. There are 30% of these seats taken by women, Mr. Speaker. Fully 17% of those are here over on this side. More than half of the women elected are Liberals, Mr. Speaker, and the other half are the rest of the parties combined. So they should do their job, Mr. Speaker, as parties and get more women to run.
Or maybe, if that's the case, more women should just step up if they feel so, but maybe there just aren't that many women that want to do it. It's a simple fact of the matter.
The honourable member who is about to speak is deserving of having her voice heard. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Prime Minister, who has long self-described as a feminist, starting in July and through anonymous sources, have repeatedly maligned Canada's first female finance minister.
Like, people are starving, having issues, living on a day-to-day basis, and they're sitting here debating equality. My God, man.
Past her already exorbitant $40 billion deficit. And now we've got female cabinet ministers defending the Prime Minister's decision to bring in an unelected man to replace her job. Why?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity and Inclusion.
Mr. Speaker, I always find it a bit rich when Conservatives talk about feminism, when their own leader will use hashtags on his YouTube videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it is anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion in this country, or when they all vote against increased funding to combat gender-based violence or to support survivors. Their leader doesn't care about women or equality. He only cares about himself. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
Putting hashtags in your description of your YouTube video really doesn't do that much, just like putting tags doesn't really do that much. This is something that YouTube has said themselves.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, the fact remains, Mr. Speaker, that after months of reports that the Prime Minister wanted to turf Canada's first female finance minister, we find out today that he's in talks to put an unelected, conflict of interest riddled man into the role. The Globe and Mail story must have really stung for every single Liberal backbencher who has carried the water of this scandal-plagued Prime Minister for years. Why wouldn't they be getting this job? So my question is this. Does the Prime Minister really think that there is nobody, no one in the elected Liberal caucus who could be the finance minister? Anybody? No one?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you,
you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the nature of the questions coming from the opposition today speak more about their opposition to feminism than it does our commitment to feminism. But that's typical, Mr. Speaker, because actions speak louder than words in this case. When we brought forward things like the Canada Child Benefit or childcare, actual policies that help women, what did the Conservatives do?
Oh yeah, because there's no single fathers out there. It's only single mothers.
They vote against it, bring in backdoor legislation to make it harder to access sexual health and reproductive rights in this country. When we work to make contraceptives free in this country, what do the Conservatives do? Stand in opposition. The real fake feminists are those folks on the other side of the Conservatives.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. Order, please.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the report on Islamophobia tabled by the Justice Committee recommends that the federal government implement all the proposals made by the Senate in 2023 on the matter of Islamophobia. The Senate's recommendations, however, are a full-out attack on Quebec's secularism, which the Senate considers racist and Islamophobic. If this report was intended to combat Islamophobia, it has failed. It promotes Quebec bashing by claiming that Bill 21 encourages racism in Quebec. The government must reject the entire anti-Quebec report by the Justice Committee. Will it do so? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my colleague knows full well, committees of this House are independent. They have the right and the duty to do the work that they want to do. Their recommendations are publicly shared, of course. And like all other members of this House, we will read these recommendations and see how they could be used or not be used. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Justice Committee has taken up the demand by Amira El-Gawabi that teachers be chosen on the basis of their religion rather than their competence. So what does Ottawa have to do with the hiring of university professors? Is there a Minister for Higher Education in Ottawa and they forgot to tell us in Quebec? Secondly, this proposal is the opposite of secularism. It's bringing religion back into our schools. And we saw what happened in Bedford and Saint-Maxime. Quebecers want nothing to do with this. When will this government stop attacking Quebec's secular model? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, committees of this House are independent. They do the work they deem to be useful for Canada and Canadians. Quebec universities are also independent and do the work that they wish to do with their jurisdictions and responsibilities. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Senate has issued a report accusing Quebec secularism of all the wrongs. The Minister for Immigration says nothing. Amira El-Gawabi calls Quebecers anti-Muslim. The Immigration Minister has remained silent. The Justice Committee tables a report repeating the Senate's anti-secularism arguments. Not a problem for the Minister for Immigration. Ottawa proposes choosing teachers based on their religion. Still great news for the Immigration Minister, apparently. But if François Legault wants to defend Quebec secularism, the Minister suddenly loses his temper and condemns a Quebec Premier. Why is this Minister lashing out at Quebec in particular? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bloc MPs are doing everything they can to seek out squabbles, but we're not going to be part of this.
Je ne sais pas ce qui s'est passé.
I'm not quite sure what happened on the other side of the aisle, but when it is not your turn to talk, when you're not recognised, it's important to not speak. If you want to have a chat among yourselves or a squabble among yourselves, then you can do so in the antechambers.
Member from Halton, Norfolk.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending in his cabinet.
The Liberals are about to smash through a $40 billion deficit guardrail. The media is reporting that the Prime Minister is forcing inflationary spending on Canada's first female finance minister by forcing her to break through the $40 billion deficit guardrail and pushing our country over a fiscal cliff. Everybody knows that Mark Carney is the de facto finance minister. So why is this Prime Minister bullying the first female finance minister and forcing her to take the fall?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what we're seeing here today is Conservatives trying to make feminism great again. But what they actually do is they don't elect women to their party. The leader actually uses misogynistic hashtags that promote violence against women. Mr. Speaker, they don't.
Does he?
Active health care for women.
Does he, though? Because if that were the case, YouTube would shut down his channel. That goes directly against the terms of service and guidelines of YouTube to direct hatred towards anybody of any kind. Doesn't matter who they are. So once again, the Liberals spewing utter bullshit.
Order. The Honourable Member for Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, feminism will always be great when there's no tokenism. The hypocrisy of this Prime Minister knows no bounds. He
Oh, that was a good one.
about progress, saying women's rights and women's progress are
Oh, the Liberals did not like that one. Greg had to shut somebody down over on that side.
Order, please.
The Honourable Member from Halden Norfolk. Please start again.
Mr. Speaker, feminism will always be great when there's no tokenism. The hypocrisy of this Prime Minister knows no bounds. He lectures everyone else about progress, saying women's rights and women's progress are under attack. My question for this Prime Minister is, will he park his hypocrisy and stop attacking the rights of women in his own caucus? Is this fake feminist Prime Minister going to really bully Canada's first female finance minister and have her read Carbon Tax Carney's update on Monday?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Services. For Indigenous Services.
That member is fully endorsed by the anti-abortion organizations that look for candidates, indeed a full 40 of them over there, that bully women when they want to make choices about their own reproductive freedom. Mr. Speaker, it's a little bit rich for members of Parliament from the opposition to get up and stand up, say they stand up for women, when on the backside, they're working as hard as they can to restrict women's freedom in this country.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, my apologies. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, this fake feminist Prime Minister, is out of control. Time to take stock. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of the management of public funds. He's lost control of his own ministers. And now he's bickering with his finance minister. She's already plunging Canada deep into a huge deficit, but the Prime Minister says we can always go deeper. He even plans to replace her with Mark Carney, a non-elected official, if she doesn't do what he wants. On Monday, will the minister present her economic statement or Mark Carney's?
Probably Mark Carney's, if I had to guess.
The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's absolutely disgusting in the discourse we're hearing today, like calling the Prime Minister a fake feminist when he has shown umpteen times that he is a real feminist, while they, on the other side, the Prime Minister has been committed to equality, to women, to the rights of women in many ways. What they are doing across the way, these people that love petty politics by putting hashtag to attract misogynist men, what they are doing is showing full disdain for the Minister for Finance.
Alors, j'ai demandé au...
Order. I would like to tell the member for Paul Neuf-Jacques-Cartier that he's had a chance to ask his question. I asked people to quiet down so they could listen to his question, and I would ask him to do the same for others, and to not take the floor unless he's been recognized by the chair.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Settlement services agencies have received notice of massive funding cuts of up to 70% to their budget. This will decimate the delivery of critical services to help integrate newcomers. Two NDP provinces, BC and Manitoba, seem to be targeted with the deepest cuts. Case in point, after 3 decades of providing essential language training to newcomers, Vancouver Community College will lose all of their funding, even though 92% of the students get employment afterwards. Why are the Liberals punishing newcomers, settlement service agencies, and VCC's wildly successful language training program?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every 5
Skeletor.
years we review the funding model for the settlement services to welcome newcomers, to let them learn, make sure that they learn English, make sure that they learn French, integrate them to the new country, overcome trauma. This is something that we can be very proud of as a country. Obviously, this year we have reduced the levels of people that we are welcoming into the country. That comes with some cuts and some readjustments, but clearly this is a sector that is critical to the integration of newcomers. We will continue to fund it generously and continue to help people integrate to this beautiful country that's the best in the world.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Albertans are paying millions of dollars in healthcare fees for their aged loved ones who are stuck in hospitals because there are no spaces in long-term care. This is one more example of how Danielle Smith is turning our universal public healthcare system into a US-style for-cash system. We know the Conservatives would cut public healthcare, and in true Liberal fashion, this government is clearly too weak to stand up to Smith's privatization schemes.
And you voted them back in.
Are forced to pay to get the care their loved ones deserve.
You voted for Trudeau to stay in power. I don't know what anybody has to say to you other than that.
Everywhere, every part of our health system must be transformed into a system of prevention rather than a system of illness. We are doing our part. In fact, I would point out just this week announcing 1.25 million Canadians who've received care under dental care. Moving forward with pharmacare, deals with every province and every territory. And yes, provinces must be held to account and be responsible for their share, for the portion that they carry and have burden for. We will lead nationally, and we demand that everybody rise to this moment to transform our health system.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, the holidays should be a stress-free period for Canadians, for all Canadians. But we know that that's unfortunately not the case for some. And during the holidays, sometimes there are extra expenses which can make it hard for some families. I'd like to hear from the minister what our government's plan is to help families during difficult times for certain families. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, whether it be the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, or tax breaks for small business, we will always be there for Canadians. With the GST break, we will be giving Canadians a little more money to spend during the holidays. The Grinches on the other side of the house only have empty promises and slogans to offer. The Conservatives are playing partisan games, but our government will continue offering real significant support to Canadians.
Is that what you call the past 10 years? Real significant support?
The Prime Minister lost control of spending in his cabinet. He sent this spending spat spiraling out of control, forcing his finance minister to smash through her $40 billion deficit guardrail promise. He then solidified his fake feminist credentials by appointing carbon tax Carney as the de facto finance minister after using her. Even the PBO confirmed they smashed through their $40 billion deficit guardrail by at least $6 billion. Will the Prime Minister confirm the deficit is not a penny over $46 billion?
Colleagues, please.
And ask members not to make noises. There's actually rules in this place for us not to be slamming desks anymore.
Oh, there's rules against slamming your desk.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Why were they slamming their desk? What the fuck?
The question, I'm certain the honourable member had finished his question. Yes, he had. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
What is going on?
It seems that we've lost a quorum in the House, Mr. Speaker, in part because the Conservatives have been attacking female elected representatives, women in this House who represent women and men across the country proudly, Mr. Speaker. If the Conservatives are really interested in asking questions of the economy, I do have answers for them. Yesterday, the Bank of Canada lowered interest rates yet again, making it easier on Canadians to buy a new home, making it easier on families that need to renew their mortgage, making it easier on Canadians that have loans, Mr. Speaker. We're keeping our eye on the ball. We're keeping our eye on the interests of Canadians.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
The last time the bank dropped 50 basis points on the interest rate was 9/11, the global financial crisis, and COVID. And carbon tax Carney's comeback fueled his fiscal feud further. The weak Prime Minister used the finance minister to rack up debt, and now he's going to replace another female minister, but this time with Davos elite carbon tax Carney. All of this just to smash through his $40 billion deficit guardrail and drive Canada's finances off a fiscal cliff. Once again, will the Prime Minister confirm the deficit won't be a penny past $46 billion?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Listening to the Conservatives today, you would think that the Conservative Party of Canada wanted interest rates to be higher, Mr. Speaker. You would think that the Conservatives want inflation to be higher, Mr. Speaker, listening to their talking points today in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, we have invested in Canadians and we have invested wisely. We have ensured that 110,000 more Canadian women have entered the workforce thanks to our early learning and childcare program. This has saved families nearly 30% in childcare, but it has also created $32 billion of greater wealth in our economy. Mr. Speaker, we are growing the economy and we're doing it wisely.
You're taxing the ever-living shit out of Canadians to help pay for other Canadians' kids.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost...
AKA redistributing the wealth. I wonder what kind of ideology does that.
The Finance Minister and the Prime Minister. She promised Canadians that the deficit would not exceed $40 billion, which was her fiscal guardrail. When you smash through a guardrail, it's too late to break. You just end up falling off the cliff. Will the Prime Minister promise that the deficit will not exceed $40 billion? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. The Conservatives seem to be asking about the economy, Mr. Speaker, but actually, they are desperately trying to deny the fact that yesterday the Bank of Canada reduced interest rates in order to help Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That's great news. That will make life more affordable for families that need to renew their mortgage. It will also let our SMEs and entrepreneurs have lower costs and will help young people who are aiming to buy their first home. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has completely lost control of spending and he's lost control of his cabinet. He's bringing in radical spending increases and is sacrificing his own Minister of Finance. And he, in fact, wants to replace her by a man by the name of Mark Carney, who has not even been elected. Canadians have already fallen victim to this government's disastrous mismanagement, and now they will be paying for the deficit. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the deficit will not exceed $40 billion? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, we've already answered that question, but what I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House have brought in actual programs to support women. How is it that the Conservative Party has voted against investment in programs like...
So the other day, Trudeau claims he's a feminist, and now the entirety of question period has been dedicated to feminism. Guys, I don't know what to say at this point other than, you know, people are starving, can't afford houses, can barely afford food, gas, and they're sitting here debating feminism. I don't have any words for this. It's an absolute clown show. It's an absolute circus. We live in one of the most equal opportunity countries in all of the world. We have policies that have been enacted that provide equal opportunity and have provided equal opportunity everywhere throughout Canada for years, before Trudeau was in government even. So this whole idea that only the Liberals believe in women or are for women or whatever the fuck they want to spew here, it's just ridiculous.
Secretary to the Minister for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as it's been clarified in the House, the CARM system was to replace a 36-year-old system that was at risk of failure. This was actually developed in 2010, this process under the previous government, and it was to address concerns raised by the Auditor General in Canada that we risked 20% of our goods at the border being misclassified. Mr. Speaker, we're going to ensure that the new system is working and there aren't delays at the border.
L'honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot.
The Honourable Member. Whenever the Liberals take on some kind of digital project, well, the bill is pretty high. Imagine what happened with Phoenix, which is still causing nightmares for public servants 9 years later, or ArriveCan, which was supposed to cost $80,000 but instead ended up costing $60 million, which was mostly to benefit dubious businesses that did not offer services. Meanwhile, the CARM system cost at least $625 million, probably more, but we don't know because the government doesn't want to tell us the real cost, as we just saw. Why is it that each time the Liberals take on a digital project, it ends up turning into a scandal?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question because it's an important reminder that the CARM system that was replacing a 36-year-old system actually put at risk assessing $40 billion worth of duties and taxes annually. Mr. Speaker, we have to make investments to ensure that the border...
Mr. Speaker, we have to spend more money.
Are being done efficiently and effectively for today's businesses, and we've ensured that any IT issues that need to be worked out are not impacting borders or any delays at those borders.
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control of his spending, his cabinet, even his own MPs. And as this government is set to blow through the $40 billion deficit guardrail, Canadians are feeling it everywhere, including the grocery store, a place the Prime Minister has never been. It's not just Canadians, his own MPs are feeling it. The member from Thunder Bay said his personal preference would be to see the government run a $0 deficit, but that won't happen. Mr. Speaker, since the Prime Minister won't visit grocery stores, won't listen to Canadians, will at least listen to his own Liberal MPs and decide not to run a dime after $40 billion.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm glad to hear the member opposite talk about groceries because I have great news for him. This House actually passed a GST tax holiday over the next couple of months to reduce the cost of groceries. But
oh, Karina, you want to talk about GST on grocery items? Well, didn't most people already know that most goods, grocery specific, are already exempt from GST? Oh, Karina, it sounds like you didn't know that.
groceries, on toys for kids, on clothing for kids, and other essential items. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member.
As a matter of fact, Justin Trudeau's dumbass got community noted because of that.
$51 because there is no GST on groceries, just pop and chips. But here's another number.
Exactly.
The unemployment rate is up to 6.4%. This Prime Minister has lost control. And as this government is set to blow through the $40 billion.
It just shows that Karina doesn't go grocery shopping herself. She most likely has somebody do it for her, because at the checkout, these are things that you would notice, but clearly she doesn't.
The Prime Minister and the Finance Minister are not even talking. Before the Prime Minister loads up his MPs on the unemployment bus, will he tell them about the $40 billion deficit guardrail, or will he just drive them over the fiscal cliff?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
You know, Mr. Speaker, for many Canadians, the GST tax holiday actually makes a difference. Just because it doesn't make a difference for that member of Parliament doesn't mean it isn't meaningful for many Canadians. Right. And when I speak to constituents in my community, when I speak to small business owners, when I speak to restaurants, they've told me how important this GST tax holiday is going to be for them over the next couple of months. So just
and then when they see their taxes raised tenfold afterwards, guess what's going to happen in 2025, Karina? Your ass is gonna be gone. Na 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 na. Hey hey. Goodbye.
Finance Minister into crashing through the $40 billion deficit guardrail. Even Liberal MPs are uncomfortable with the financial consequences. Ask the member from St. John Rossay, who was quoted calling for fiscal restraint, or the member from Thunder Bay Rainy River, who said that he wanted a zero deficit, which we all know is not going to happen with this NDP Liberal government. If the Finance Minister crashes the deficit through the $40 billion guardrail, will the feckless Prime Minister allow a free vote for his MPs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Interesting that the Conservative member chose to talk about bullying in his question after today's question period, which has been fraught with bullying from Conservative members.
Boo-hoo.
Back to what's important to Canadians, I would like to talk about the...
You look like a pool table.
When looking at the numbers, we can see that consumer confidence is up. We see consumer spending is up. And, Mr. Speaker, folks are looking forward to the tax holiday that is also coming up. On Saturday, we will be removing federal taxes. We'll be removing GST from everyday goods in order to help Canadians with a tax cut I know they need.
Oh, Greg is making it real awkward right now. Greg forgot he had to do a job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, yesterday I was very pleased to visit Willis's College dental assisting students to celebrate the first anniversary of the beginning of the Canada Dental Care Plan, which will enable more than 3 million additional Canadians to consult a dentist, because 1 out of 4 Canadians has avoided seeing the dentist because of the expense. Could the minister tell us how this plan is making life more affordable for Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I'd like to thank my colleague for Ottawa Vanier for an excellent question. The bad news is that when you ask the Leader of the Opposition why he's against the dental plan, he says it's because it doesn't exist. And he's discouraging seniors from signing up. But the good news is that they are not fooled by what he's saying. 2 million Quebecers, 3 million Canadians have successfully signed up to the dental care program, which has saved them on average $760 a year since they signed up. This is very good news for all Quebecers and bad news for the Conservative leader.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. Former advisor to 2 Prime Ministers, Robert Asselin, has said the rising debt burden limits Canada's ability to act during future economic slowdowns and unforeseen circumstances. The Minister of Finance set a fiscal guardrail of a $40.1 billion deficit in her last budget that looks drastically off the rails. This isn't just a number. It's a glaring sign of systemic overspending and poor fiscal planning. The Liberals' choice now is clear. Will they heed their former advisor or drive Canada's deficit off a cliff?
Probably off the cliff. I love how they say that they got dental care for 1 million Canadians, but there's over 40 million people living here.
Mr. Speaker, is the land of opportunity and possibilities. You don't need to ask me, Mr. Speaker.
And way over 2 million people lined up at food banks.
Just in 2023, we landed the largest investment in Dow's history in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, Mr. Speaker. I think the Conservatives should all rejoice. It's Christmas, Mr. Speaker. I hope they're going to put that in their Christmas card to their constituent to thank this Liberal government for bringing jobs in Alberta.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
That's a minister that's never seen a check he didn't want to sign of Canadian taxpayer dollars. You can't. Well, former Liberal advisor Robert Asselin also stated you can't pick and choose fiscal anchors as you go and renege on a commitment you made only a year ago. There's a huge disconnect here. The Prime Minister wants to spend away to popularity, and the Finance Minister is trying to hang on to a shred of fiscal accountability. Liberals are famous for taking no lessons, but this one's an obvious choice. How far past the guardrails is the Prime Minister pushing the Finance Minister's credibility?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Order, please.
Colleagues.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the question. Mr. Speaker, actually, there's more good news for their Christmas card, because let me talk about another investment in Canada, Mr. Speaker. This time, BHP, Mr. Speaker, the largest mining company in the world, have made its largest investment in its history in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. In Saskatchewan, close to $20 billion, their largest investment in their history. Mr. Speaker, I hope again that in their Christmas card that they're going to send to their constituent, they're going to thank this Liberal government for bringing jobs in Western Canada, growing our energy sector, and making sure
The honourable member for St. Margaret's, South Shore St. Margaret's.
The Liberal minister is so informed he doesn't even know Canada Post is on strike. Another lost cabinet minister. More leaking Liberals are speaking out about the economic disaster of this Prime Minister who's decided to crash through his $40 billion deficit guardrail promise, an obscene number in its own. And the Liberal MP for St. John said that Liberals need to show fiscal restraint, like that's going to happen. Crashing through his promised $40 billion deficit will increase the cost of food. So if the deficit guardrail is broken and driven right through, will the Prime Minister allow his Liberal MPs a free vote?
L'honorable ministre des Pêches Océans et de la Garde Côtière.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, we have already answered this question. What I want to know from my colleague across the way, who is from the Atlantic region, what I want to know is how they could vote against investments in small vessel ports. How could they vote against investments in the Coast Guard? How could they vote against, in the supplementary estimates, how could they vote against investing in fuel for the Coast Guard so that they could help save our fishers?
Investing in fuel? You literally tax the fuel on top of a tax. Oh my God.
Again, when members are afforded the respect to ask a question, I'd expect them that they would also have the respect to listen to the answer. Minister, please. L'honorable député de Sudbury.
Mr. Speaker, from supporting wildfire response here in Canada to deterring aggression through our multinational battle group in Latvia, members of our armed forces have continuously stepped up to keep Canadians safe so we can live in a more secure and peaceful world. For our armed forces who are separated from their families while on deployment, this can be a hard time of the year. Can the Minister of National Defence tell us how our government continues to support our armed forces so they can do the crucial work of keeping us safe at home?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to begin by thanking the member from Sudbury for her question, but also for her hard work on our very hard-working Defence Committee. As we head into the holiday season, I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to all members of the Canadian Armed Forces and to the entire defence team. They've answered the call to serve and defend their country, and they have our confidence, our pride, and our gratitude. I also wish to extend our thanks to their families and all who support them in this essential work. Mr. Speaker, à tous les membres des Forces Armées Canadiennes.
To all the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, I would wish them a very happy holidays and a happy new year.
From Courtney, Alberta, for Courtney, Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, for 70 years, Friendship Centres have served as vital community hubs for urban Indigenous peoples. Now they're on the front line of Canada's mental health crisis, the toxic drug crisis, and catastrophic climate events like floods and forest fires. But federal funding hasn't kept up. The National Association of Friendship Centres are clear in that they need $62 million of federal funding annually to meet their demands. The Liberals keep letting Indigenous people down with their chronic underfunding. Will this government finally provide Friendship Centres with long-term, sustainable funding?
Hear, hear. Oh my God, just throw more money at it, because that fixes everything.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for his question, and I agree with him. Friendship Centres provide essential services to some of our most vulnerable people in our communities. Their network offers culturally appropriate, mindful support to navigate healthcare systems, finding safe shelter, and learning Indigenous languages, as well as supporting our Indigenous communities when they go into urban centres. They also provide mental health services. But, Mr. Speaker, with this work, $32 million goes to them every year, and our government has committed an additional $60 million through Budget 2024. There is
an additional $60 million? It's going to be almost $100 million every year. What the hell's a friendship center? Like the YMCA? Just like a community center?
North Nebraska. Mr. Speaker, in my riding there are several businesses that are struggling because they can't renew their temporary foreign workers' work permits because now they're over the new threshold, which the government lowered by 10%. The unemployment rate is extremely low right now. So these businesses' survival is...
Oh, she said 16 million? I thought she said 60 million. Holy shit.
...the country against their will and their families. So what will the Prime Minister do to help these businesses to keep this essential workforce while also respecting immigration rules?
L'honorable ministre des Anciens Combattants.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ever since we came to power, our government has made significant changes to this program. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program needs to meet the real-time needs of the labour force market. For Canadians, we have tightened up the program because there have been changes in the labour market. We are listening to what Canadians need, and we will take strong action. Thank you.
Colleagues, following discussion,
colleagues, please,
from all parties, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of John Horgan, former Premier of British Columbia. À la suite de discussions.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of John Horgan, former Premier of British Columbia.
Alrighty then. I don't know who that Premier is. And I'm going to be a bit mean here. I quite frankly don't really care. I don't know if that's just me. Like, I don't know who this guy is. He's not really done anything for me. So I just, yeah, I don't know. Oh, he's dead. No tear here. I don't know, man. I don't know. Horgan made ICBC insurance no fault and screwed a lot of people. Yeah, no one cares. He's been dead for a while. Why they backlog? I don't know, guys. I don't know what they're doing. It's the clown show at its finest. If you want my honest opinion, I think they should renovate the whole House of Commons, making it like a WWE UFC walkout with light show and pyrotechnics and everything. They might as well just go all in on the circus.
see that the Honourable, there are a number of folks who will be, there are a number of people who are going to be raising points of order. And
oh, here we go.
Given notice to the chair, and the chair will recognize in the order in which they have been, delivered. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, regarding Bill C-63, if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following.
I'm afraid that there is...
Annihilated! The Conservatives are going to do this every time now because it happened to them yesterday. Watch.
What the Minister would propose. On a point of order, the Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
The Liberals are probably going to do the exact same.
You'll find unanimous consent today for the following motion, given that Bill C-63, the so-called...
I regret that the Honourable Member...
so nothing is going to get passed because of what happened yesterday.
A request for unanimous consent, rather. It being 3:24, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the previous question to the motion.
Oh, that was it? No actual points of order, just whatever the fuck you want to call that?
As it being 3:24, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the previous question to the motion to concur in the 9th report of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Call in the members.
All right. I don't know if they're going to do an actual vote today. I did notice that Scheer walked over to the other side and is sitting down with the Chihuahua right now having a conversation. I don't know what that's about, but I always find it interesting to see MPs talk like insane amounts of shit to one another and then Scheer just interrupting whatever the hell is going on. Gotta love it. I always find it interesting to see that, though. Crossing over and talking to each other.
The question is on the previous question. Mr. Lemereau, seconded by Ms. de Brusen, moved that this question be now put. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Ng.
Ms. Ng.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Mr. Champagne.
Monsieur Champagne.
Ms. Tassi.
Ms. Tassi.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms. Sachs.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Mr. Dollywall.
Mr. Dollywall.
Ms. O'Connell.
Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Brusen.
Mr. Brusen.
Mr. Van Couverden.
Mr. Van Couverden.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Assassi.
Mr. Assassi.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Monsieur Serré.
Monsieur Serré.
Madame Brière.
Madame Brière.
Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Fisher.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Schiefke.
Mr. Schiefke.
Ms. Sidhu Brampton South.
Ms. Sidhu Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Ms. Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Madame Mendez.
Madame Mendez.
Ms. Bradford.
Ms. Bradford.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Thompson.
Ms. Thompson.
Mr. Julian. Pardon. Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Madame Bérubé.
Madame Bérubé.
Monsieur Désilets.
Monsieur Désilets.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Matheson.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
Ms. McPherson.
Ms. McPherson.
Ms. Kazan.
Ms. Kazan.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Barron.
Mr. Desjardins.
Mr. Desjardins.
Ms. May Saanich Gulf Islands.
Ms. May Saanich Gulf Islands.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Brock.
Mr. Denton.
Mr. Deltel.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Ms. Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Ms. Gray.
Ms. Gray.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr.
Mr. Ellis. Pardon me.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kmitch.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Beltold.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Abouteif.
Mr. Bouteif.
Ms. Ferrari.
Ms. Ferrari.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Macaulay Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Malello.
Mr. Malillo.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Van Popta.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Genereux.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Lobb.
Mr. Mazer.
Mr. Mazer.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Martel.
Mr. Martel.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Allison.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mrs. Falk Battleford Lloydminster.
Mrs. Falk Battleford Lloydminster.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Alrighty, electronic voting period. This is where you get to see everybody and which way they voted. I saw somebody earlier in the chat say, you mean to tell me these people are all voted in? Yes, they are. Based on their riding, they get voted in and they get the seat. We are actually losing the CPAC stream here. It was lagging earlier and it seems to be continuing. Hopefully it smartens up here for the end of the stream. But anyway, thank you all for joining. We're currently waiting for the electronic voting period to end. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. If you are new, make sure you turn on the notification bell, turn on all notifications. There's been a thing going around. Apparently YouTube has been, I guess, unsubscribing people from accounts. Now, whether it's due to inactivity or YouTube just being YouTube, I don't know. But I would recommend to keep an eye on your subscription list because of that. Just to let you know. YouTube is known to do this, especially with political channels. I don't know why, but that just seems to be a theme that happens. My God, this music is intense. Anyway, hopefully you all are having a great day or night, depending on where you are from. The more I watch this channel, it becomes clearer how Canada has never been a superpower. No, it's kind of shocking, isn't it? It's kind of weird how our parliament works. Or doesn't work, you could say. The clown music. Yeah, I mean... insane stuff going on right there. Oh man, this upcoming tax break, I've said it time and time again. I sound like Trudeau, a broken record. This tax break is going to absolutely annihilate us. This is going to be so bad once these 2 months are up. I am not excited. I'm far from excited. Actually, the only thing I am excited for is October of 2025. As long as Trudeau is gone. My God. My God. We need to make sure that Pierre actually holds his word, though. We cannot let this happen again. We cannot have another government go rampant for another term, 2 terms, 3 terms. No accountability. Zero efficiency. It just can't happen. We are in such a poor position right now as a country. And if it continues, we won't even be Canada. It's just that simple. We're already losing our history as it is when Trudeau removes Terry Fox from the passport. So it's just ridiculous. We need a Trudeau break. Exactly. We need a break from this insane, out of control Liberal government. Out of control in many ways. Literal many ways. And they expose themselves day by day. Whenever they speak, whenever they enact a policy, whenever they take half of an action. It's brutal. Absolutely brutal. It's like a horror movie. Trudeau's coming up behind you to steal your wallet. Yes, but we've seen government accountability, and with a super majority, he could be even worse if he wanted. Yeah, that's not wrong there. Majority government can be quite interesting, to say the very minimum. Oh my god, listen to this music! That's after Trudeau has stolen your wallet and has decided to start running away with it. Oh man, I'm in at 20. I believe this vote is probably going to pass. I don't exactly know what this bill is even for. Something to do with Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, Survivor Retirement Pension Benefits, Marriage After 60. I have no idea what this is for. I'm depressed about YouTube. YouTube's an interesting platform. YouTube does what YouTube wants. It's the bottom line. Whoa! Getting intense there. Trump is really trolling hard for the Conservatives in Canada. Trump is trolling hard because, like I've said numerous times, nobody is taking Canada seriously due to our poor leadership. I mean, Trump in his first term was kind of a troll, right, to the populace. He cares about he cares about Americans specifically, right? That's his whole thing. That's what he runs on. America first. He doesn't really care about international. And there you have it. It's Trump. That's what he does. Exactly. Exactly. I don't expect anything different. I expect him to actually quadruple down this term. And especially with Trudeau in office, he is just going to bully the ever-living fuck out of him because Trudeau's an absolute loser. Across the board, internationally, Trudeau is known as a loser. The electronic voting period has come to an end. There might be some late votes coming in. Clifford Small. Biggie Smalls.
House that the electronic voting period has ended. If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognize them.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my app is not functioning, so I wish to register my vote in favour. Yay.
Et pour.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yes pour, 209, 209. Nays contre, 119, 119.
I declare the motion carried.
La prochaine question est...
The next question is as follows.
That the ninth report of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, presented on Wednesday, December 14, 2022, be concurred in. If a member participating in person wishes that the motion be carried or carried on division, or if a member will recognize the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
We previously asked for a recorded vote, Mr. Speaker.
Oh boy. Alrighty. We got another vote coming in here.
Vote?
Recorded vote on the previous question.
All right, Darth Fungus has muted the microphone again.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we ask on this important motion governing the Gold Diggers Clause that has disrespected so many of Canada's veterans and their spouses, we would ask for a recorded vote.
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House
10-minute period
participating in person.
All right, each vote is 10. Never mind. What am I saying? They're all 10 minutes.
Rise.
All right, guys. I'm probably going to call the stream here. I mean, do we really want to watch the second vote? It's probably going to go the same way if I had to guess. I guess I'll talk for a little bit longer because I have an announcement. I want to do a stream tomorrow. A little special stream. I want to cover the past 2 Senate question periods. So I will be going live tomorrow, roughly the same time. I believe one of the Senate question periods happened today. And I believe, yeah, one happened today, one happened yesterday, which I want to watch, and then one might happen tomorrow. So I might be watching 3 Senate question periods tomorrow at roughly the same time. It's not really much of an announcement. I say like it's going to be some big news. Guys, be prepared for this insane news. No, I typically don't do a Friday stream, so I guess that would be the news there. But I will be going live tomorrow, roughly the same time, around 1 p.m. I will be covering the 11th, the 12th, and possibly the 13th for Senate question period, if it happens on the 13th as well, aka tomorrow. But I guess we might as well continue off this vote, and then I'll end the stream. We're already here. We are already here.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Tassie.
Ms. Tassie.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms. Sachs.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Kara.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Boutier.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Brewson.
Mr. Brewson.
Mr. Van Couverden.
Mr. Van Couverden.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Baptiste.
Mr. Assassi.
Mr. Sassy.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Nakfi.
Mr. Sidhu Brampton East.
Mr. Cedar Brampton East.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Kellaway.
Mr. Kellaway.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
Madame Briere.
Madame Briere.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Ms. Sidhu Brampton South.
Ms. Cedar Brampton South.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Ms. Hefner.
Ms. Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Madame Mendez.
Madame Mendez.
Ms. Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Châtel.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Thompson.
Miss Thompson.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Madame Michaud.
Madame Michaud.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Lemire.
Monsieur Trudel.
Monsieur Trudel.
Madame Berubet.
Madame Berubet.
Monsieur Désir.
If you are just joining us right now, they are currently voting on Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, something to do with a survivor retirement pension benefit, marriage after 60.
Ms. Kazan.
Ms. Kazan.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Madame Hughes.
Madame Hughes.
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Barron.
Mr. Desjardins.
Mr. Desjardins.
The committees are good stuff too for the Senate. Might check out a bit of that as well tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But I definitely will be live tomorrow for the Senate question periods.
On a besoin des vacances.
Excuse me, I need a vacation.
Oh, please rise.
Oh, Greg. Greg's saying he needs a vacation. We all knew it. We all knew Greg was tired of this job.
Before resuming his proceedings.
And the intense music returns. All right, guys, we have a 6-minute voting period here. Once again, you get to see everybody who voted. It looks like the first one passed with a little bit of conflict, but it appears this one is going to pass unanimously. So I don't entirely know what the difference of each bill was that just got passed, but I guess there was something different there that the Conservatives did not like. I don't know what, though. I do not know what. Anyway, when is the next confidence vote? Oh, we can... Honestly, I was gonna say we can only hope for one, but the NDP just, like, they're not gonna vote on it. So if a fourth non-confidence vote were to happen, I can expect it to not pass. And once again, the NDP would just be making themselves look incredibly fucking stupid, which they've already done numerous times whenever they say Trudeau is not fit to be leader, or Trudeau has not done this, or they have not pulled through with this, X, Y, Z, whatever. And then they continue to vote him into power. I don't get it. I really don't. Obviously, Jagmeet wants his pension. Obviously, the NDP might not have as many seats next year or sooner if they call the non-confidence vote. I think the NDP party is probably going to go crashing and burning next year. Big time. That's my prediction, but I guess we will have to see. Don't you guys love that you still see people like Mary Ng and Randy? They get to vote. Randy Boisonnault or whatever his name is. Randy was supposed to step down due to the scandal he was involved in, taking money from Indigenous businesses. He claimed he was Indigenous when he actually wasn't. The scandal was so bad, Trudeau forced him to step away from his seat, and he was replaced, but he's still able to vote. Gotta love that, right? And Mary Ng, one of the numerous people that was supposedly or allegedly involved with foreign interference, and she's still striking international deals. Just did one with, I believe, what was it, Taiwan or Thailand or something like that. Got to love the corruption being swept into the closet, swept under the rug. The skeletons in the closet only continue to grow. A lot of skeletons in that closet. A lot of skeletons. A lot of people say the Trudeau government, very corrupt. Might be one of the most corrupt I've ever seen. But my God, I don't know what to say. I really don't. It's just insane when you see these MPs getting involved in scandal after scandal, or saying that they want Trudeau to step down, or whatever, and they continue to hop on his wiener. It is crazy. There's Varani, the rat himself. Yeah, I gotta love that Trudeau called himself a feminist. He's a funny lad. He's a funny guy. Oh, man. I'm actually a known feminist, and I will protect all of the women in Canada. Alright, Trudeau. Alright, buddy. Is that why you keep throwing your women MPs under the bus? Gotcha. One said no? Who said no? Do we gotta go back and see? Because right now it looked pretty unanimous. He's a narcissist. Yeah, he is a narcissist. He's also an idiot. All things everybody knows. Oh, man. But people still vote for him. Knowing all of this. Knowing that he's dressed up in more costumes that you can count on your hands and toes. People still voted him back into power. Absolutely insane. The guy who claims he wants to write in stone what discrimination laws here will be in Canada. But like I said, dressed up in more costumes than you could imagine. Fang is back. Fang is back, ladies and gentlemen. Spewing Trudeau's quotes one after another, probably copying and pasting them directly from Twitter if I had to guess. I actually do believe Fang is Justin Trudeau's burner account. I actually do believe this. Or it's some MP's burner account. No, I'm just kidding. It's a little bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy, but some of these CCP chatbots in here, they're getting ridiculous, you know what I mean? Alright guys, we got 50 seconds here on the vote. 50 seconds remain. This one went unanimous. This was a unanimous vote by the looks of it. All right, the last minute votes are rolling in. 30 seconds on the clock. Good disguise as a PM. One said no. Yes. Yes. I guess we will, I guess we won't ever know. I might have to go back later and see who said no, but I think it's kind of funny. Were they independent? Was she independent? Was she a liberal, conservative? Was it Elizabeth? Was Elizabeth drunk and stood up at the wrong time, pressed the wrong button? Countdown to extinction. And now we are all extinct. Thanos snapped out of reality. You guys are still here. Thank you for being here. This is going to be the final stretch of the stream. I will say it one more time. I will be live tomorrow to cover Senate question period from the 11th, today, and tomorrow if it happens. It should accumulate to at least an hour and a half, maybe more, because I probably will throw some articles in there as well, some Twitter posts as well. Last minute votes coming in. It seems that there is an issue with the electronic voting.
Is now over. If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognize them. The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yes pour, 328, 628. Nays contre, 0. Okay.
I declare the motion carried. I wish to inform the House that because of the deferred recorded divisions, the time provided for government orders will be extended by 24 minutes. Alors, je désire informer la Chambre.
Oh, wow. 24 minutes. Yeah, I guess question period did kind of go late, didn't it? Alrighty. So, on top of, like I said, I will be live tomorrow. I typically don't go live on Fridays, so I'll see you there if you're there. If not, today might actually be, if I pull up the... Oh, we have a weekly question. Hold on. We're not going anywhere yet.
I'm very interested
Not
in
going
this
anywhere
issue
yet.
And in the question and the answer, the honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, and it being Thursday, it's time for the highlight of many people's week, which is the Thursday question. Before I do that, though, Mr. Speaker, as this is the last Thursday before we rise for the Christmas adjournment, where we'll all be back home in our ridings, meeting with our constituents and providing them assistance with all sorts of issues. I just want to take this opportunity to wish all my colleagues on all sides of the House a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank the excellent work that is done in this House to support members in the work. So a special tribute to the Pages, many of whom are away from home at school. I know they'll be returning, many of them will be returning back home as well. The House of Commons support staff who make sure that we're served at a most excellent level of professionalism so that we can carry out the work on behalf of our constituents. And we're about to enter that period of time when the days stop getting shorter and start getting longer again, which is, of course, a beautiful metaphor for what Christmas is all about, the light of our Savior, Jesus Christ, coming to redeem mankind. And for those who celebrate other holidays, especially Hanukkah, there's a similar metaphor there with the light that comes with the lighting of the menorah over that period of time as well. So I just want to wish all Canadians who may happen to have tuned in just in case, just in time for the Thursday question, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and especially to my government counterpart.
Oh, sheer. Don't worry, buddy. We're always watching.
Us and Canadians, what will be the business of the House for the rest of this week and into next week as well.
So I'm guessing this will be the last question period of the year.
Well wishes and wish similarly all Canadians the similar happy holidays. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank my honourable colleague for those kind wishes, and of course I extend my Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to him and all members of this House as well. And as this is the last Thursday question and answer for the period, it also is one that I look forward to every single week, and I look forward to returning to them in January in 2025. In response to my honourable colleague with regards to next week's business, as we will be returning for a couple of days, as was announced earlier this week, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance will be presenting the fall economic statement in the House at 4 p.m. next Monday. I know that
4 p.m. next Monday.
Members in this place will be looking forward to that. Madam Speaker, as you well know, the last few months have posed several unique challenges around the House of Commons, but I would also like to extend my gratitude to you and your 3 fellow chair occupants for all of their hard work. Je voudrais également
I'd also like to pay tribute to the staff who work so hard to help us accomplish so many important things, starting, of course, with the clerk of the House, Eric Jantz, and his table officer colleagues. This recognition extends to the administration of the House of Commons, with all its branches and departments, to those who provide security services in the parliamentary precinct, and to the pages in the House. We are served by an outstanding group of people.
agréable à ce qu'il fait toujours.
Who take so.
These words seem really two-faced coming out of Karina. I don't know about you guys, but
Offices for their dedication and tireless efforts. And on behalf of the Liberal members of Parliament, I would like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and all of the best for the new year. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
all right, so it does appear that they will return for question period at least on Monday and Tuesday of next week. If we take a look here. That is the wrong view. There we go. Take a look here. Today is the last Thursday. Like I said, I typically don't do Friday, but tomorrow will be a special stream covering Senate question periods and possibly a bit of the committee, depending on if it happens. Then, the 16th, Freeland will be announcing the deficit at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't know what that is for Mountain Time, Pacific Time. You'll have to do that calculation yourself. But that should be interesting. I think that might call for an extra long stream on Monday. Just saying, depending on how that goes, we'll see. Because if they do question period, I will be live at 1 p.m. And if they're doing the announcement at 4 p.m., I really don't see the point in ending the stream for half an hour just to go live for another half hour. So I will probably be doing an extra long stream on Monday due to the deficit announcement. Special stream tomorrow, extra long stream Monday, and if they do question period Tuesday, I will be there as well. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day or night, depending on where you are, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.